Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Naruto Fell for Arcane and Jinx. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Monsters am I? Perhaps you should speak more softly to me then. Monsters are dangerous. Teeth gone sharp, eyes glowing red. Monsters feel neither guilt nor remorse. They simply kill. What's that? This is wrong. I shouldn't be this way. Well, who's to blame for that then? You know. Yes, again. You know. This is what I could have been. What could have been the boy had a hole in his eye. It was a rather large crater Silco considered, just off center where the lad's lungs and heart ought to be. Now there was nothing but charred skin. A clean strike, through and through, whatever struck him had torn through his orange and black jacket, burning and cutting as it went. His clothes hadn't stood a chance. What little remained of that blue and orange jumpsuit barely clung to his frame, burnt and singed. There was some irony to be had there given who found, he supposed. The youth lay there on the table, silent as the grave. His eyes were closed, almost as if he were sleeping. Another mystery. He didn't know who he was, where he'd come from, much less where he'd been before Singed dragged him here. But he'd seen enough to make his own assumptions. Another life likely lost in the gutters of the Undercity. Lost to the violence. A small distant part of him pitied the youth. The death of a child was never something to be celebrated, unknown or otherwise. But his presence here begged the question. Dragging himself away from such maudlin thoughts, he turned from the crimson cadaver and favored Singed with a cross look. The man looked entirely too proud of himself. Why show me this? He flicked a hand at the corpse upon the operating table. I've no interest in a dead body. The maimed madman tittered a little. But that's where you're wrong. He's not dead at all. Those words hing between them, a guillotine ready to drop. Silco blinked once. What? Have you lost your mind? See for yourself. His personal scientist gestured to the unmoving, unfeeling form. Look at him. Mismatching eyes swung to the pale, lifeless body. What of it? Nothing special there. I see a corpse. Nothing more. Yes, you do, but this corpse has a pulse. There could be no mistaking the note of glee in his voice. I found him in alley, heart still beating. Silco felt his neck creak, such was the force with which he rounded on him. On a whim he reached down and touched a hand to the boy's wrist, pressing his thumb to the vein there. Sure enough, he felt a reedy thump in response. His hand snapped back as if he'd been burned. That shouldn't be impossible. He hissed the word like a curse. He's dead as dirt with that hole in him. Even a blind man could see that. He can't have a pulse. But he does, behind that mask. He couldn't see Singed's face, but his good eye crinkled as he smiled. He may appear dead, but he's quite alive. He just needs a little kick. Silco didn't much like the sound of that. Before he could think to ask what the devil Singed was on about, the masked man reached past him and snatched up a large syringe. A familiar violet fluid lay within. Shimmer. In a single seamless movement the scientist slotted it into the blonde's arm. His thumb came down on the stopper and pressed it. The fluid slithered down the injector and into his bloodstream. What are you doing? He snatched his wrist, hauling him away. We don't have enough shimmer to waste on the dead, Singed only smiled. Wait and see. Silco released him and reluctantly complied. Sure enough, his curiosity was reward in due time. As he looked on aghast, vicious violet veins scrawled across the boy's body. His eyes burst open with a grasp, giving him a glimpse of wild blue eyes. Then were lost to him rolling in the youth's head as he thrashed furiously upon the table. His restraints snapped like so much rotten rope, sending metal buckles flying in every direction. One of them grazed Silco's cheek as it hurtled past and slammed into a nearby wall. From there, the chemical must have awoken something in the boy, stirred it at the very least, because his incredible injury began to mend. Time spun backwards as red light crept up from the strange tattoo etched into his stomach and crawled over the hole in his eye. The boy's body spasmed on the table anew with a wordless cry. White bone grew over the gap in his eye, followed by organs and muscle, then finally healthy pink skin. Silco wanted to look away, but he couldn't. He saw every moment of it. A bloody mortal wound, gone in no time at all. Without warning, the boy slumped. His eyes glided shut on a groan, head lolling to one side in his slumber. Hurts, definitely alive, then. The dead didn't speak. Singed smiled. Marvelous, isn't it? Silco swallowed once and wiped a bead of sweat from his head. Not quite the word he'd use. Madness. Witchcraft. Inhuman. Those words flitted through his mind in a storm of mad moths, devouring the carefully ordered tapestry of his thoughts. In their wake, he found himself unable to think, much less speak. Fish never seen the like before. Where to begin? He was missing an arm and a leg when I found him. Singed remarked casually, sparing him the indignity of stumbling over his words. The dogs had gotten to his body, you see. A pause now, as he waited for the words to sink it. He grew those limbs back overnight. Silco's gaze snapped back to the boy, more a teen really, and considered him anew. What is he? I do not know, the madman confessed. That's what makes him so interesting. His body clearly reacted differently to shimmer than most. Already he could see those purple veins receding as his body metabolized the drag. No excess muscle mass or gray skin. Who was he? He couldn't be much older than Jinx. Maybe a year at a stretch. And yet for all his stillness he'd done the unthinkable. The boy woke briefly before you came, Singed prattled on, ignorant to his inner musings. He babbled some strange things. Chakra, ninja and the like. He pulled forth a diagram from a nearby desk and began to sketch on an adjacent table. I'm afraid the terminology is rather unknown to me. They were lost on Silco as well. How did a man rise from the grave? As though called forth by that very thought, the battered blonde sucked in a ragged breath. Oh dear. Singed was already stepping back, seeking the safety of a shelf. I wouldn't stand too close, were I you. He can be rather volatile at times, Sasuke, too late. The boy's back arched with a tortured scream as he bolted upright. Wild blue eyes roved about. A clawed hand shot out, caught Silco by the arm and yanked him down. In an instant he found himself face to face with a frightful visage. A low growl pierced the air. Where am I? Silco arched an eyebrow. You're safe. Safe? No, not safe. He killed me. The dazed youth released him and touched a hand to his CT, then frowned when he didn't find a hole there. I died. It was cold. Dark. A shudder passed through him and he hugged both arms to himself. So cold. Curiosity reared its head. Who killed you? Sasuke. The boy choked once, swallowed, then recovered. He stabbed me, a trembling hand gestured. Chidori through the CT. He touched a hand to his head. Blue eyes boiled red through the cracks in his fingers. Though he understood. Everything was going to be all right. How could he? There was something about his voice just then, a growl as the red light bubbled about him. Singed scooted forward and jotted some notes down. Fascinating on that, they were in complete agreement. Zaun could use this. Whatever this chakra substance was, it had proven powerful. If weaponized, it could prove even more useful still. Beyond useful. Essential. And even should they fail, they'd already succeeded. Anyone capable of healing like that was more than an asset. They were a prize, one to be protected at all costs. And yet a thorn of guilt pricked his black heart and held him back. Had he not been betrayed by a man he once called brother? He'd thought of Vander as his own flesh and BLD. They were going to change Zaun together. Until he turned on him. Choked him. Drowned him. With time his hatred for the man had dulled, but for this boy the betrayal was all too fresh. More than that. It was raw. A small sliver of his cold soul empathized with him. Silco was not a good man. He hadn't been for some time now. But neither could he bring himself to do this. He couldn't chain that boy back to the table. Something told him that any such attempt would render him a red stain on the floor. Singed made to speak, but a quick wave of the hand silenced him. I don't understand. The youth looked up at them with those wide red eyes of his, voice a high warble of confusion. Why did he kill me? Silco's heart twisted painfully in his He had no answers to such a question. Why indeed? He knew not this Sasuke fellow. Frankly, he had no longing to ever meet him. Then the boy struck the final blow. What did I do wrong? Well, that tore it now, didn't it? Silco knelt slowly, careful not to draw undue attention to himself. The boy watched him like a hawk, ready to bolt at the slightest provocation. That eerie red light was still in full flow about him, ready to lash out if he did anything untoward. Unbidden, he found himself reminded of another broken child, one he'd found in a similar situation not so long ago. Well, Jinx might get along with him if nothing else. One could hope. What's your name, son? Naruto, the boy murmured. My name's Naruto. His body betrayed him and moved before he even realized it, hauling the bereft boy into his arms. The youngster stiffened at once, no doubt expecting a knife to the gut. None came. He tucked the little lad into his knee and gave his back an awkward pat. He heard him whimper once before the floodgates opened. Red light sputtered and died as felt the tears soak his coat. Thin arms tightened around him. Yes, he decided. Jinx might well like this one, if only because he was just as broken as she. You didn't do anything wrong. It's okay. He murmured over his shoulder. We'll show them. We will show them all. The boy sniffled and clung on tight. Tired one asleep, rest then. You're home now. I'll take care of you. A red-rimmed blue eye looked up at him. Silco patted the boy's head once. Nothing would be the same. I know it will. Betrayal, that pain that feels like it'll eat you from the inside out, it can either break you or forge you into something greater. You need to let the past die. So the fear of pain will no longer control you. Neither of you. You're strong now. Just like you were always meant to be. You're both perfect. What can be? Jinx didn't do jealousy. She was better than that. She wasn't weak. She didn't let other people trip her up, didn't care what they thought of her. Nope. Not like Powder. No. Never poor, pitiful Powder. Powder had been weak. Powder was gone. Powder fell down a well. Powder wasn't coming back just like Vi. She was Jinx now, through and through. She'd owned that final insult and made it her name. No matter what the voices said. She'd become strong, and she'd be damned if she fell back into her old ways. But when Silco brought him into her workshop, she still felt a twinge of uncertainty. She looked up fro her bombs, saw the boy, and knew him at a glance. Blonde boy. Dead boy. She'd seen his body sprawled on Singe's table some days ago, before the madman caught her gawking, tooted, and shooed her away. Thinks. Hadn't thought much of him then. Still didn't now. Even if this dead boy had proper fancy clothes now, a bright red tunic and dark trousers in place of those ratty orange-blue rags he'd worn. Dressing up a dead body didn't make it any less dead. But dead bodies didn't move now, did they? Who's that? She cursed herself for asking almost immediately. She didn't want to know his name. Knowing it would make him real. Fear hit her like a baseball bat. Who was he? Why was he here? Was she being replaced? No. Silco wouldn't do that to her. He cared. Didn't he? He had to. He must. Right. Uncertainty burrowed its way into her heart like worms. Wriggling, rotten, gnawing worms. She could feel them gnawing her resolve down to nothing. Spurred by her hesitation, the voices started to whisper again. Useless, her teeth clenched. Stop it, shut up, weak. She shook her head, blue braids flailing. Going to replace you, wild eyes flitted left, then right now, seeking an escape. Calm down, Jinx. Some of her anxiety must have shown through, because he raised a hand to forestall an outburst. This isn't what it looks like, I assure you. Yeah. Then what is he? She kicked a boot against one of her toys, sending it skittering off the propeller and into the chasm below. It struck something and detonated, briefly bathing them in a shower of pink light. 'Cause it looks like, her head tilted, teeth bared in a snarl, is you found a replacement, his name is Naruto? Silco's scarred face creased in a worn smile as he interrupted her. Go on. He gave the boy whiskers, her mind conjured the nickname a nudge between the shoulders, spurring him forward as one might a skittish animal. I had hoped that the two of you might come to an understanding. What with him? Whiskers looked like SHT. As if reading that very thought, the boy flicked an anxious look at her. Jinx found herself mirroring it, huffing a little in anger as she hugged her arms close to herself. Who was he? Dead people should stay dead. Like the rest. Dead was dead. Even if she still heard their voices. Don't need an understanding. She raised a hand to fiddle with the goggles on her forehead. Why is he here? Because her foster father looked her dead in the eye. Like you, he too knows the sting of betrayal. Jinx fought down a shiver. You did this, her past howled at her in a cascade of white noise. All your fault. Because you're a Jinx. She flinched and clutched her head. Don't think about it. Accident. It was an accident. Not her fault. Didn't mean to. I'll leave the two of you to get acquainted. With one last lingering look, Silco retreated. As he did, she caught the ghost of a smile on his face. Play nice. The door closed, sealing them in. Naruto didn't look at her. An old wound itched in Jinx's heart. So, she scuffed a black boot against the floor. What did he mean by that? She didn't miss the fully body flinch that shot through him, nor the haunted look in his eyes that followed. You couldn't fake SHT like that. Frowning, she strode forward and pinched his cheek. You deaf or something? The boy squawked and caught her wrist. Silence passed between them. Well, my best friend stabbed me. The boy scratched at his ST with his right hand, picking at something Jinx couldn't see under his shirt. Jinx wondered if there was a scar there. He was like a brother to me. Family. A new tremor shook him as he clenched his teeth. He killed me. Jinx tugged her arm free, but didn't retreat. Even so, her brow furrowed. She might be mad as a hatter, but even she knew the difference between the living and the dead. Dead men didn't talk. Dead men didn't walk. Dead men certainly didn't squawk. Hey, that one rhymed. She'd have to remember that. No. Focus. Pay attention. Whiskers said he was dead. Yet here he was. But she said as much. You're alive, though? His lips pursed. Not by choice. He'd warbled a little there at the end. It was a sad, broken thing, on the edge of becoming a sabor, a snarl. She'd made a noise like that once. After Vino, she shook her head fiercely. Don't think about it. Think about other things. Like this guy. His family betrayed him to... Something twitched in her fractured mind. At least Vi hadn't stabbed her. No, just punched her, knocked her down, called her a Jinx. She left me. The words tumbled out before she could think to hold them back. She betrayed me too. Naruto blinked. Ooh. Crap baskets. She didn't mean to say that aloud. Often, Jinx stammered quickly. She feigned a laugh and danced out of his reach. Family, right? Can't live without him. Can't shove him back in the old baby maker. Another pall of awkward confusion passed between the two of them. The boy broke it with a snigger. You're weird. Yeah, a grin twitched at her lips. You're weirder, maybe. He shrugged. Then his gaze shifted. Just a hair. Just a touch. Why's your hair blue? Dunno. She reached around and fiddled with the end of one long braid. Why you got those whiskers? Meh. The ghost of a sunny smile graced those marked cheeks. Dunno, he parroted back at her. Born with him? Jinx looked at the boy, then, this stranger with the stranger name. Really looked at him as she hadn't before. He looked back. Their eyes met. She took a step to the right and he, the left. He mirrored her. They circled one another. 1 step, 2, 3, 4. When he came to a halt, so did she. He spun and she copied him, pivoting one on heel. A long blue braid flew out and smacked him in the face. His sputter of surprise drew a merry little giggle from Jinx. Her hands flew up to muffle it too late. The sound echoed through her workshop. Something sparked between them, and not anger or envy, but a single ember of understanding. In a single spectacular moment of blissful sanity, she began to understand the truth, why Silco had brought him to her. She held on to that understanding, even when the voices threatened to creep back in. Silco hadn't brought him in as competition. Far from it. I get it. Her grin was madness itself. She tilted her head, a strange of wild blue hair falling across her face. You're broken too. Like me. Maybe, he allowed. Why'd that guy call you Jinx? His words wiped the smile from her lips as surely as a slap to the face. Jinx? Jinx? Jinx. Vi's voice returned with a vengeance, howling in her head. You did this. You're a Jinx. Fingers like ice trailed down her spine. With all her might, she pushed them away and buelled forward. Naruto didn't budge. A flicker of surprise flashed through his eyes, but he gave ground. Even when she grabbed at his coat, a spark of scarlet flickered through his gaze. Nothing more. Oops, by contrast his smile was terribly fragile. Didn't mean to upset you. Someone hurt you pretty deeply. I'm sorry. Jinx found herself sputtering. 2 little words. Funny how a simple string of syllables can undo a person. She couldn't remember the last time someone apologized to her for, well, anything really. It felt kinda nice. Made her all warm and fuzzy inside. She hadn't felt like this in a while. Wasn't sure she liked it. You've got a weird name, too. Jinx finger jabbed his nose to cover it up. The hell's a Naruto? Now it was his turn to consider her. Something flashed across his face. He offered his hand. Wanna be friends? Jinx stepped back and considered his open palm, half expecting it to explode, or barring that, vanish into thin air. Someone who knew her pain. Someone who had suffered a betrayal even worse than hers. Someone who understood her, who would never, ever betray her. Never ever. Mine Jinx like that. Mine she liked it very much. Mine oh yes, she liked that a whole lot. Although the voices needled Jinx anew, for the first time in years, she found herself able to ignore them. Her fractured mind bleated like the little girl she still was deep in her heart. Hope fluttered to life in her shattered psyche, a wounded butterfly taking wing and struggling for air. Not a brother, no. Better than a brother. No need of brothers here. Not like Milo. Not like Clagger. Brothers died. But a friends were forever. Friends, until the end her mind warmed to the idea as she clasped both hands behind her back. Play cool. Don't overreact him, Jinx. Naruto frowned. Was it something I said? She did all the overreacting. Mine, he never saw her coming, if only because she absolutely pounced on him. Their bodies collided in a tangle of arms and limbs. He went down with a noise torn somewhere between a yelp and a laugh as they sprawled to the floor. She held tight, burying her head in his inhaling deeply. A thought occurred to her. Her gaze rose to meet his. What? Color flooded his cheeks. Was it something I said? Jinx snorted, blew a strand of blue hair out of her eyes and held up a finger as she lay sprawled on his pinky promise. The whiskered warrior blinked rapidly. Pinky promise, she repeated, thrusting her finger forth to poke him strong in the cheek. If you break it, I'll break your fingers. To his credit, Naruto didn't panic. He simply blinked again. What am I promising here? That you'll always be my friend, Jinx buelled forward, forehead kissing his. No matter what you have to promise, or... She scowled and pinched his cheek. Or I won't talk to you anymore. What? Is that all? All right. Naruto rolled his eyes yet still hooked his finger with hers. Yeah, you're fine just the way you are. Liar, pants on fire. Hey, she giggled when yanked her forward and gave her a crushing hug. Okay, I'll stop. Her legs flailed. Let me go. No, he sang back. You're my new bestie but interesting. A merry little sigh escaped Jinx as she held on tight. So wanna see how I make my bombs? Naruto perked up. What kind of bombs? It was a match made in hell. Seva looked up from her drink as the door eased open. How did it go? Silco slid past her and sank into his seat with a sigh. He took a moment to simply sit there and lean back, basking in his triumph. Mismatching eyes stared at the ceiling, watching a fan spin lazily overhead. He closed them a moment later, simply reveling in the moment. Was this what pride felt like? Not as a patriot of Zaun, but the simpler sort. The pride of a pleased father. He'd not experienced the like before. He hadn't lingered overlong in Jinx's workshop, but he'd caught the sounds echoing up from it all the same. You see, Silco had heard laughter of 2 children, followed by the sound of a great many explosions. He'd not heard Jinx laugh like that in quite some time. That was victory enough for him. That and another matter. The boy would be good for her, he thought. A stabilizing influence, perhaps. 2 broken children could yet fit together to form something new. Well enough, he relented with a low chortle and opened his eyes at last. He's a special sort, that one. Really? His second took another swig from her bottle. If you say so. He reached into his jacket. You should meet him. What? She scoffed. Oh, I'm not a babysitter. That wasn't a request, his false eye flitted up to meet hers. I need someone to watch them until they're ready. You're the only one I can trust with this. Seva offered a non-committal grunt but didn't deny him. Of course she didn't. She had the best interests for Zaun at heart, and know it or not, those two were a pivotal part of the plan to come. Perhaps the boy would grow on her in kind. Time would tell. For now there were other matters to which they must attend. And then we have another prize. With that said, he lifted a small vial from his coat pocket and held it aloft for her to see. A vivid scarlet light danced within, bubbling every so faintly. What is that? Seva leaned forward to peer at it in turn. The light danced in her eyes. A new kind of shimmer. Silco's smile was all teeth. Oh, not shimmer. And so the years flowed by like wind. Ever onward. Ever upward. Fire in the hole, merry laughter swelled through the workshop. Naruto knew that tone far too well by now to ignore it, much less what came after. A rueful smile tugged at his lips as he whirled away from his workbench. A swift kick knocked it down, scattering its contents to form a crude barricade of sorts between him and impending doom. From there he slapped both hands over his ears, then ducked for cover behind it. On a whim he squeezed his eyes shut for good measure. Wouldn't do to go blind for a half a day again. Even with both hands clamped down, he heard a harsh flick. He had time enough to SCK in a quick breath. Then all hell broke loose. Scarlet and pink fire in the chasm like some fell flower, as two elements became one. He could see it in his mind's eye. It surged upward in a pillar of light to pierce the very heavens themselves, burning bright white in the night to sear even against his closed retina. A moment passed. Then another. At the count of 9 opened his eyes, coughed a little, and leaned out over the workshop to witness the aftermath. A low whistle pierced the chasm. DMN. Definitely the right mixture this time. He could see the fires from here. Seemed mixing chakra with bombs worked a little too well. Silco would be pleased at least. Speaking of pleased, where was? Did you see that, Whiskers? Right on schedule. Jinx crashed into Naruto's sea like a rowdy rocket, physically driving him back half a pace from the sheer force of her collision. Rather than retreat like any sane individual, her arms linked around the back of his neck and held on for dear life, legs curling as she all but dangled off him. His arms drifted to her waist to anchor her before she could drag him down into the abyss. Not that he'd ever let her. It worked, she chirped happily, cuddling close. My new bomb finally worked. Naruto found himself wheezing out a breath. Pretty sure half the underground saw that light show. Exactly. Mad, merry laughter swelled in his still ringing ears. Best bomb ever. Her forehead kissed his, bringing with it the faint scene of smoke and shimmer mixed with napalm-filled chakra. She made a happy noise and cuddled closer still, all but pressing him into a wall to get at him. In an instant Naruto became aware of just how closely her body pressed against his. The way her curves melded with him. A beat of hot heat hit his cheeks. They weren't kids anymore, and say what you would about Jinx, but she was a cuddler. She liked being touched. At a loss for words, he settled for a grunt instead and patted her back. We'll show those Piltover punks, she rasped, burying her head in his. He felt her smile against the fabric of his shirt. It was all teeth. Every last one. We'll show 'em all. Naruto hummed a little and patted her back. If she wanted to blow up a few enforcers, then who was he to stop her? No skin off his back. That. Still there was a part of him that confessed some confusion. Why bring him down here at the crack of dawn? It didn't make a lick of sense, even for her. What was she up to? Her head snapped up suddenly, blue eyes blazing bright in the low light. Almost forgot. Quick as a flash, Jinx slipped out of his grasp and danced toward a nearby curtain. Naruto right his own ruined table and squinted after her, trying to discern what lay behind the pale red fabric. He failed. Whatever it was, she'd hidden it well, which really meant something considering how abysmal she was when it came to hide and seek. Here goes. Pale hands closed around the worn fabric, her lips curling in a grin of pure joy. Happy 17th birthday, big guy. Confusion morphed into understand, leaving him somewhat taken aback. Wait, is that today Jinx tore the cloth back with a flourish, sending it fluttering down into the chasm as she laughed. Naruto flung up an arm, half expecting another blast, or worse, a cream pie to the face. One could never be sure where his partner was concerned. When no such thing came, he dared to creak an eye open. Slowly, gradually, he lowered his arm. He heard a soft click as she fiddled with the lights. A spotlight snapped on, illuminating her gift in all its glory. Naruto's his jaw parted with an audible click. Is that what I think it is? Jinx crossed both arms behind her back and stepped aside, allowing him to view her gift in all its glory. Jinx was known for three things: bombs, mischief, and mad inventions. This was clearly the latter. Was it any wonder, then, that she'd make something like this for him? It wasn't terribly large. If anything, it was rather compact, if forged from dark blue and red scrap metal. He could see where she'd scrawled graffiti onto it, and a big pink heart carved near the knuckles etched overtly likeness of a fox baring its teeth in a snarl. Typical Jinx. She really did love her motifs. There was something worked into the knuckles, likely meant to channel force forward, but for what purpose he knew not. Naruto stepped forward to admire it, then lifted the strange hand from its pedestal. Words failed him. It's an explosion gauntlet. Silly Jinx popped her head over his shoulder as though this answer were the most obvious thing in the world. You like to punch things and I like bombs. So here you go. When he didn't immediately respond, she barreled on. You're always making that sphere thingy in your right hand, so I didn't want to mess with that, but I can make you another one if you want. Her words trailed off as he held his tongue. Jinx dithered. You don't like it, do you? He felt her pull away, then heard her kick at something in the background. I'm sorry, her voice faltered, sounding very much like a little girl. I'm only good at making stuff that blows up and I thought you'd like it, she hiccuped. I'll do better next time, I promise. Panic bleeded in Naruto's heart. No, none of that, coward. He ignored the voice, whirled and caught her by the wrist before she could bolt, but only just. A quick tug reeled her into his arms. The gauntlet struck the floor at his feet with a harsh thunk, but still he held tight, unflinching, even when she began to squirm. Jinx put up a token resistance at best. He'd found that she enjoyed hugs, no matter the occasion. Whiskers. Her voice rose in a threadbare whispers. Hey, ow, she grimaced a little when he squeezed her. Not so tight, I'm not mad. He pulled back, took her by the chin when she tried to look away, and thumbed her face up to his. I just didn't know what to say. And this. A quick kick launched the gauntlet into the air, allowing it to smack down into an open palm. I love it. No one's ever given me a gift like this. You love me too, right? Jinx stammered up at him. You won't leave me, right? You made a pinky promise. Times like these reminded him just how fragile she was. In many ways Jinx was a stronger person than she'd been before, but in others she was so much weaker. She relied on him, depended on him, just as he did her. Naruto didn't mind. Nothing wrong with a little weakness. They could be weak together. He sat down with a sigh. Jinx plunked down in his lap. Her forehead touched his. Soy, are you really not mad? A blonde brow quirked. Do I look angry to you? You do love me. She kissed his forehead, babbling the words. I know you do. Even though I'm different. Don't change. Please. Promise me you'll never change. He wiggled his little finger at her. Already promised, remember. She laughed and hugged him tight. Help me put this thing on. Her eyes lit up and the fear evaporated. In no time at all she helped him slide the gauntlet on and secure the straps. It was the work of mere moments. From there, Jinx helped him to his feet, steadied him, then gave him a slap on the back. Give her a whirl. Naruto hefted his new gauntlet. Blue eyes flicked to the nearest solid surface. With a roar, he drove his fist deep into the cavern wall. He felt something click in his gauntlet. And there was fire. Silco did not fear monsters. He acknowledged their existence, of course. Only a fool would willingly deny the danger before them, but he still didn't fear them. After all, there was a monster inside of everyone. He knew this truth better than most. He was raising two little monsters after all. He'd taken in two broken children and taught them to accept who they were, jagged edges and all. They were what the Undercity made them. Together they would show Piltover what real monsters were. They would show them all. A lone finger drummed restlessly against the desk as he considered Singe's latest report. Neither good nor bad that. Jinx was not stable per se, she could never truly be after her sister's horrid betrayal, but there could be no denying that she'd made great strides. She was better now, still mad as a hatter, but less erratic. She hadn't suffered a hallucination in months. A marked improvement. Naruto was good for her in that regard, just as she was good for him. And then there was the matter of this chakra substance. Someone knocked on his door, cutting that thought short. He looked up from his papers. Enter. Naruto poked his head in, covered in soot, grinning from ear to ear as he always did. Hey pups. You got a sec? Not really, but the boy had no way of knowing that. I have a little time. Silco favored him with a small smile in return as the boy eased the door shut behind him. He was strong now, carrying himself with confidence in place of all the sadness and sorrow he'd shown all those years ago. Was this what pride felt like? Not for himself or his plans, but pride in someone else. He rather liked it. Idly he noticed the gauntlet the boy now wore. He quirked a brow at it, recognizing his daughter's handiwork. Jinx had been busy for his birthday, it seemed. I take it she gave you your gift? Naruto's smile faltered. Yeah. Might have blown up a few things. And the bomb. The boy told him his news. Excellent. Now then, he dipped a hand into one drawer. I have something for you as well. You'll receive it later tonight. His wayward warrior blinked. What is it? A faint smile. Ever curious, this one. Come now, that would ruin the surprise. In any case, the rest of the day is yours, he allowed, but remember there's work to be done tomorrow. Naruto sighed. Don't worry about the shipment. Jinx and I won't let anyone touch it. His left eye fixed on him, waiting for his response. And if the firelights interfere? Naruto tilted his head an inch to the right. What about them? So DMN proud. We have 5 minutes. No more like 5 seconds. Unleash the beast, how could you do this? It was coming for her. It trusted you she could feel it, see it, sense it. The monster was hunting her, stalking her through the night. Teeth gone sharp and eyes glowing red. She tried to run, tried to get away, but she couldn't. The beast was bigger than her. Faster than her. Stronger. It rode her down and tackled her, grabbed her by the shoulders and screamed in her face, all anger and wrath and crows. Teeth and crows. They swarmed around her, buffeting her face, filling her vision, until all she could see was those eyes. Those awful eyes. Jinx, it howled at her. All your fault. Blue eyes snapped open, wide and bloodshot. She jerked upright with a grasp, heart pounding, skin slicked with sweat. Wild blue eyes flitted about, half expecting the shadows to come alive. Any moment now her demons would drag her screaming into her dreams. A tiny shiver shook her shoulders, spurring a soft hiccup from her lips. Just a dream, she babbled and clutched at her head. Just a dream, the voices gibbered at her, filling her mind with doubt. All your fault, all your fault. Shut up, she bit her lip until she tasted BLD and the acrid tang of shimmer. The pain centered her, if only for a moment. They never did. They never would. Jinx, a faint noise at her side had her turning. Naruto slept peacefully beside her, sprawled out in their shared cot, dead to the world. Just looking at him was enough to quiet her fears. She reached out and gave him a nudge. Whiskers. No response. Jinx scowled. Hey Naruto, he continued to snore away unabated. She reached out and tweaked his cheek. An angry snort greeted her, accompanied by a jaw-popping yawn. Was it? Some of her terror must have shone through on her face, because he blinked quickly. Comprehension dawned, followed by understanding. He sat up and propped himself up on an elbow. A rough hand pawed at his eyes to brush the cobwebs away. He blinked again. Once, twice, thrice now. And then, just like always, he opened his arms to her. Come here. No prodding needed. Jinx all but dove into him and nestled her head against his shoulder. He grunted at the collision, but didn't falter. His good arm came down over her back to pull her into his. She inhaled deeply, drinking in his familiar scent. It soothed her soul. The faint smell of cinnamon and sweat mingled with the heady tang of his, what did he call it again? No, chakra. That was the word. Whatever it was called, it comforted her. His hand stroked the back of her head. Bad dreams again. She'd had nightmares before, but this one had been different. Darker. Sharper. More real somehow. I saw a thing. She bit her lip, uncertain. I don't know what it was. Teeth and crows. Another yawn, tinged with a hint of laughter. Foxes eat crows, you know. It was such a Naruto thing to say that she giggled. Idiot. Maybe, he pulled her a little closer, but I'm yours. He didn't know how badly she needed to hear those words. Maybe that made her weak. Maybe she relied on him too much. Maybe that was her mistake. She didn't care. When he ran his hands through her hair, she felt a pleasant shiver shoot down her back. She didn't wear her long braids to bed anymore, not these days. Kinda helped when you had someone to do your hair, you know. She liked it when he touched hers and when he touched her. She wanted to touch him. And so she did, snuggling closer. He was warm. A girl could fall asleep like this. Let me know if you have any more bad dreams, alright? Kay. Look at me, he thumbed her face back to him before she could doze off. There you go. That's it. You don't need to change. His forehead kissed hers. You get me? You're fine just the way you are. Jinx is perfect. Ain't nothing gonna change that, not now, not ever. Those words warmed her broken heart. Her lower lip trembled. We'll always be together, right? He wiggled his pinky finger at her. You're not getting rid of me that easily. Jinx released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She could figure out these feelings later. For now. Can we stay like this a little longer? Naruto muttered something incomprehensible, but didn't let go of her. Jinx cuddled closer. It was enough. Dawn came with surety, and work with it. Seva was almost surprised when the brats were the first to meet her on the barge. Earlier that. How unlike them. Now remember, Seva warned, you stay with the cargo. Jinx rolled her eyes as she sauntered past with a keg of shimmer. Yeah, whatever you say, boss lady. No argument. She must be in a good mood. Naruto will stay up top with the rest. The blonde snapped off a salute as he set two more down. Sure thing, look. Seva's face burned in a way that had nothing to do with the sweltering afternoon nor the up-and-coming operation. Cheeky little devil. Jinx was one thing, but the boy was another. She could no sooner push him away now than she could stop breathing. These last few years he'd followed her around like a lost puppy until she cracked. How could you say no to a face like that? It just wasn't possible. Some of the goons snickered in the background. She swore to throttle them later. Don't call me that in public. He grinned. Whatever you say. The pair shared a firm embrace and scarpered to their positions. They were actually behaving today. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. Naruto felt his right ear twitch. He thought he was imagining it at first, but no, the longer he listened, the louder it became. A low drone filled the air from above, a noise so distant, so faint as to barely be noticed by anyone else. If it weren't for his keen senses, he wouldn't have heard it until it was too late. But now, he checked his watch. They're a bit later than I expected, but still on schedule. A small, rueful smile graced his face as he went about his work. Firelights. Just like Silco said. No way they'd ignore a shipment like this. It was too large a target, too juicy to let be. They were going to attack in force. With each passing second he heard the low rotating whine of their boards growing louder. And yet, for all that, he felt no fear. But because they'd planned for this. Blue eyes rose and caught Seva's across the way. She quirked a brow and he nodded, flicking two fingers toward the front and the back of the ship. She didn't question him. Never did. Mom was the best. She might act surly in public, but in private, she was one big softie. Now was not such a time. Showtime, People's Seva's artificial arms swept up as she whistled. We've got bogeys incoming, get those weapons ready, port and starboard sides. Tarps flew away. Weapons came up. They were well prepared when the attack came. True to form, the firelights swept in with a storm of sound. Right into a hail of gunfire. Seva's arms slammed down. Loose, Gatling guns empowered by his chakra roared to life as one entity. A rain of molten death ripped riders from their boards with ruthless precision. Armor meant nothing. Bullets punched through armor and flesh without fail, opening grievous wounds and ending lives. Credit where it was due, they reacted quickly. Only 5 fell to enemy before they changed tactics. Their leader whistled sharply. One of them flung a strange earthen-colored sphere at him. He caught it in his fist and crushed it. Crystal crept up his arm, only to be burned away by vermilion chakra. Well, he hummed. That's new. Others weren't so fortunate. Lacking his speed and reflexes and likewise weighed down with their heavy weaponry, they were unable to react in time. A series of startled sounds at his flank told him of their fate. One by one, the guns went silent. Another slammed into Seva's, pinning her to the deck in a mass of earthen crystals. Blue eyes Gulged. Mom, don't worry about me, she snarled. Protect the cargo, he'd do more than that. Anger sparking in his heart, Naruto stepped up and caught a stray firelight by the face as they flew by. Firm fingers closed around their skull. Momentum did the rest, ripping their hoverboard away to send it careening into the abyss. A cry of pain was muffled against his gauntlet. They clawed at his armored arm, to no avail. He squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, until their masks splintered under his fingers and Bield began to a pipe came whistling in from the right. He caught it with his free hand, yanked it down, and drove an elbow into their mask. It bought his victim a moment to wriggle free while he was distracted. Naruto let them limp away into the smoke. He recognized the mask. He'd seen it before, so many times before. A smile touched his lips. Nutoi. A wry grin touched his cheeks. Something like that. Friend. This is your only warning. The leader stood his ground. An ember of guilt flickered in Naruto's heart. He stamped it down. Have it your own way. Another firelight, a boy with wild violet hair, lunged while he was distracted. They smashed something, a hammer, into his skull. It shattered, leaving them clutching a worthless stick. Without looking back, he caught this one by the face, too. This time he didn't let go. The man kicked at his CDST, to no avail. His grip was ironclad. First their mask crumbled. Then his skull. One final squeeze. That was all it took for him to crumple. His gauntlet clenched and he ceased to be. What was left of them hung from his arm by a thread. Monster, am I? He cast their body over the rail and into the void, uncaring of the anguished noise the leader made. Time and time again I gave a chance to run. To retreat. To lick your wounds. And yet, his eyes bled red as anger finally had its day. When I fight back and your people die, suddenly I'm the bad guy. More chakra began to bubble up from his stomach. He tried to quell it and failed. Scarlet chakra shrouded his shoulders, not quite forming a tail or a cloak, yet shrouding his soul in strength all the same. It was so infuriating. He wasn't Jinx. He couldn't kill without remorse. He remembered each kill, and that regret from them was an ever-present weight around his neck. But it had to be done. He understood that now. You could put an enemy down, rough them up, even knock them out, but at the end of the day, they'd always come back for more. Sasuke had taught him that lesson. Silco had merely expounded upon it. Because you see, the only good enemy was a dead enemy. He turned to face his next victim. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. The firelight leader lunged with a roar. So, Naruto's arms snapped up and barked. Jinx's gadget worked like a charm, maybe a little too well even. He made a fist, swung, and the gauntlet barked. The blast caught his prey unawares and launched him away. He struck the deck, bounced once and tried to tumble to safety. Not this time. Naruto leaped after him, caught him by the face with a clawed hand, smashed him into the deck. It wasn't enough to stop him. The firelight leader tried to rise. So he smashed his masked face down again. Porcelain began to crack. Sturdier than the others. It only made him angry. He hit him harder, wailing on him. Can't slam, just slam, listen, slam for once in your life. Slam. A stray firelight raced by on their board and raked a weapon across his back. His cloak lashed out and tore them in half at the waist. The firelight leader howled beneath him, too wounded to do anything more. Another lunged at him while he was distracted. "Bisa, you don't fight with honor." "Of course I don't." Naruto swayed out of the way, smashed a Rasengan into a Firelights, vaulted another, and tore him apart. "I'm a ninja." He became a red dervish of death, writhing and twisting, whirling and whirring without a care in the world. How did you think this would end? A sharp and sudden bang from the bowels of the ship caught his attention. He whirled just in time to see the hatch fly open, then Jinx came flying out with a cry. "Good girl." Movement at his feet caught his gaze. He looked down and found the Firelight leader crawling away. A dazed eye blared hatefully at him through a hole in the mask. Younger than he expected. He hesitated for a crucial instant, resolve faltering. "This isn't over." It really was. Naruto reached down. Someone screamed. His head snapped up. When he looked back, he found Jinx frozen, rooted to the spot. Paralyzed by fear. Unable to move, even as another drew a bead on her. She'd caught one of the Firelights by the wrist, smashed their mask off, and why wasn't she moving? Did she not see that big BSTRD behind her? He saw her lips move. Vi, the Firelight brandished a flare, ready to drop it into the shimmer. She'd burn. They both would. Jinx, there was only one choice. He ripped a pistol from his belt and squeezed off a shot. It struck the Firelight's center mass. She crumpled with a gurgle, the flare left unspent. It clattered to the floor and fizzled away. He lunged at the Firelight behind her and kicked him away over the side, spear and all. Only then did he realize his mistake. He whirled back to the Firelight leader and found him tumbling over the railing, with the last of his men, dragging his board with him. The moment he vanished, he heard the whine of an all-too-familiar engine. "Damn it, get back here," he hastened to the side, poised himself to leap down after the man paused. They were gone. Only morning mist remained. Naruto sagged back with an angry oath. Failure. But was it really? They'd protected the shipment. Even now he could hear the sounds of crystals shattering, of Seva Mom and the rest breaking free of their bindings. Not a single barrel of shimmer had spilled, and the corpses of their enemies lay sprawled about. No alarms rang. No enforcers came running. It was, by all accounts, a clear victory. And yet, Jinx stomped up to him, hauled him back from the rail, and snatched at his wrist, heedless of the fading chakra boiling around it. "Why did you do that?" Naruto blinked, taken aback. "Do what?" "That was no one." He walked over to the girl, nudged her with a boot, and rolled them over. Glassy eyes stared back. We've never met her before. Her face. Jinx didn't seem to hear him, eyes gone wide. "It was her face. I saw it." His brow furrowed. "Whose face?" "Vimi's sister." "No." She clutched at her face and shook her head. "Stop it." "Shut up." Though he said nothing, she batted his hand away when he reached for her. "Powder isn't here anymore." "Powder's gone." Powder fell down a well. "Jinx? Calm down, you're all right, you're safe." She crumpled to her knees and wept. All my fault." "What happened?" Naruto stood his ground under Silco's gaze. Jinx didn't. She growled and looked away. "Seva already told you." Silco leaned back in his chair, unruffled behind his desk. "I'm asking you, Jinx." She physically flinched as if she'd been struck. One of those Firelight wackos was a girl. With pink hair. Silco palmed his face. Now it was Naruto's turn to wince. Understanding dawned, and it wasn't at all a pleasant one. He watched the proceedings and felt like an intruder, an outside party bearing witness to something he shouldn't have. But to leave now would devastate Jinx. And so he stood his ground, holding his tongue as they began to bicker. "Your sister's gone." Silco spoke before he could. "You know that as well as I do." "Why, she snatched a pen off his desk and fiddled with it, twirling it between her fingers. "Can't live with him, can't stuff him back in the Yoel baby maker, right?" Silco didn't rise to the bait. "Losing that shipment would have set us back weeks. We were fortunate that Naruto was there with you." "I get it, all right." Jinx kicked at the floor, shattering a board with her strength. "I screwed up. It won't happen again." "I know." His expression sobered. "You should focus on your gadgetry. Take some time." Jinx huffed. "I don't need time. Take it anyhow." A web of complicated emotions flashed across Jinx's face. Shock, sorrow, betrayal. Her fists clenched at her sides, and for an awful moment, Naruto feared she might fly into a rage. She didn't. Instead she whirled, braids flying. One smacked him in the face and stalked toward the door. She ripped it open, nearly tearing from its hinges. Bright blue eyes glared back at them, brimming with tears. Fine, the door slammed with a deafening back. Naruto waited until her footsteps had fully receded. Only then did he dare speak. She gonna be alright, she will. He sounded so certain. She just needs some time. He hoped so. But he wasn't willing to let the matter rest so easily as she. Silco leaned back in his chair and steeped his fingers. You have something to say. Naruto dithered for a moment, kicked one foot against a rotten floorboard and marshaled his courage. Is her sister really dead? His mentor blinked once. It was a testament to their familial relationship that Silco didn't simply order him out then and there, much less snap at him for his sudden insolence. He stood his ground. Silco respected that. Enough to lower his guard and offer him the eyedropper on his desk. To the best of my knowledge, yes, he didn't flinch as he brought the tool just over his damaged eye. Marcus assured me that he killed her with his own 2 hands. Naruto nodded once, squinting a little as he lined up the needle within. I don't like that one. He's slippery. He has his uses. The blonde quieted his heart and squeezed the trigger. Silco grunted once and doubled over with a gasp as he injected the much-needed medicine. A moment passed between the two of them, between father and son, as Silco collected himself. A single violet tear ran the length of Silco's cheek, dripping from his blackened iris. At length he straightened, fixed his hair once more, and leaned back against his chair. Only then did he speak. Why the sudden curiosity? Do you know something? He didn't. But he suspected. It's just, when his gaze met his, Naruto refused to back down. Instead he pursed his lips. I've just got a bad feeling about this. I want to talk to him. I'll arrange a meeting. He waved a hand. Let me know if his story deviates from what he's told me. The agreement startled him. Just like that. I thought you'd disagree with me. Trust your instincts, boy. They've not steered you wrong before. He cracked a smile. Thanks, Div. Silco coughed once but didn't deny him nor his words. Naruto permitted himself a vindictive little thrill. Got him. An idea struck Silco then. He saw it in his father's face, the slight widening of his good eye. These clones of yours. Many can you create? Naruto's smile was positively contagious. As many as you need. But just a thought. His fingers drummed across the desk. I may need you for an operation, 3 days from now. Well, that didn't sound ominous at all. They preferred to keep his abilities hidden, the better to keep Piltover off balance. But if Silco wanted him to use his gifts openly for one seat meant their timeline had moved up. If they'd lost today's shipment, things might have been set back weeks. But they hadn't. And now things were advancing, the cause marching relentlessly onward. The thought warmed him. Is there anything else? A pause, considering his words. Naruto gave a nod and turned to leave. All right. I'll be going then. Son. A pleasant little thrill shot down his spine. He paused and looked back. Silco met his gaze intently. Look after her. The ghost of a smile touched his face. Always will. Naruto found her. Of course he found her. Jinx didn't expect any less of him. He always knew where to find her when she was down, when she felt weak, tiny, helpless and small. Maybe it was magic. It might be some sixth sense of his, fine-tuned just for her sake. She liked that idea. To be honest, she didn't know, and truth be told, she didn't really care how he managed it. He was here. That was all that mattered. She heard the heavy clomp of his boots against the metal floor, a steady thud-thud-thud as he neared her hidey hole. In her mind's eye she imagined the lively beat of some great drum pounding away in her ears. Almost brought a smile to her face, that, he doesn't care about you. Her smile faded. Shut up. What do you know? Come on, Jinx. Naruto's voice cut through the static. Why were you sulking? We kicked butt today. He was trying to get a rise out her, to make her respond and reveal herself. Well, tough tots, she wasn't falling for that. Not this time. She'd hidden herself in one of the maintenance tunnels leading to her workshop. It had been a tunnel, once upon a time. These days it was a passageway of mismatching pillows and blankets, a riot of color, a fort of sheer fluffiness, the entryway of which was concealed by a single tattered sheet. They'd built it together. It was her own little refuge, a quiet place tucked away from the world where she went when it felt like everything wanted to hurt her. And right now, it felt the entire universe was pressing down around her ears. "He'll leave you." Pieces off pesky voices. What? Nothing to say. She heard him smack his lips with an audible pop as he wandered their workshop. "You can't get rid of me that easily." His footsteps came close. Closer. Closer still. His shadow lingered just beyond the sheet. Yup. He definitely knew where she was. Blast him. She squirmed backwards too late. A hand swept under the worn fabric and lifted it, careful not to tear the ruined sheet further. Bright blue eyes beamed back at her, framed by a cheeky smile. "Hello, clever girl." Despite her best efforts, Jinx felt a faint heat bloom in her face. Clever girl. His nickname for her. He only ever used it when she was at her wit's end. She certainly felt like it now. He saw her indecision and winked at her. "Room for one more under there." Jinx scooted aside and he joined her in the ruined fort. The moment he did, Jinx felt her resolve crumble. Her body betrayed her. She found herself leaning into him. Her forehead kissed his shoulder. An arm came down around her waist and pulled her close. She reveled in it, embracing the simple warmth his body offered her. They sat like that in companionable silence for some time, content to just sit and be. And then, "Wanna talk about it?" She huffed. "Oh. All right." Her lips pursed, forming a thin line strong enough to bruise. "He thinks I'm weak." She half expected him to argue, to say that she was wrong. All she received was silence. Terrible, awful silence. It dragged on and her thoughts went with it, spiraling down, down, down into something ugly. Did he think the same? Of course not. He wouldn't do that. Would he? Jinx rounded on him. "I'm not weak." She wasn't prepared for his smile. This one was different than the others. It had an impish air to it, his inner prankster peeking out behind the glass of his eyes. "Never said you were." His grin deepened, becoming pure teeth. "Let's show him how strong you are." All her fears burned away to ash. "Really? Come on, I've got an idea." It was a rather nice explosion, Naruto thought. Below him, he could hear the screams as the fairground burned. It was a decent distraction. Some enforcers would die because of Jinx's trap, but no innocents. No children. The guards would rush down there, blissfully unaware of what they'd done. What they'd taken. But they would know. Sooner or later. Because of him. Because of her. People had died tonight. There could be no turning back from this. He hardened his heart to them and kept walking. "Whiskers. Let 'em burn, Jinx." A shimmering red eye glared over his shoulder, the eye of a beast. "It's no longer our concern." He held the blazing blue gemstone in his offhand, held it up before his eye, considering it. "We got what we came for." His fist closed around it. "Okay." She squeezed his hand and skipped on ahead. Best date ever. Naruto nearly missed a step and stumbled. Well, duh. She winked over her shoulder. "What did you think this was?" A rueful sigh escaped him. Hardly what one would consider a date, this. Then he paused. Considered her anew. Frowned. Because you see, Jinx had paused too. She was looking back at him now. Really looking at him. He wasn't sure he liked that look, if only because he'd never seen it before. His lips pursed into a baffled line. You alright? Don't move." She stepped up, grabbed him by the face and kissed him. It was a soft, shy thing, almost tentative really. He was left with the linger scent of smoke and something sweet. Almost like sugar. He nearly licked his lips, then thought better of it at the last second. If her gaze had been sharp before, now it was smoldering. There, she retreated quickly, hands clasped behind her back. How did that feel? Naruto blinked once, tried to speak, and managed a string of gibberish. Her grin was too pure. "I'm guessing that's good. Come on, let's go." Laughter spilled into the night as they ran. "You don't seem to understand. There's nothing I wouldn't do for her. Nothing." She's suffered enough. I ain't gonna stand by and let it happen twice. Try to hurt her. I'll end you. That's your only warning. Dirty little animals, you said you could control them. Marcus burst into Silco's office with a roar, uncaring of the scene he made behind him. Rage emboldened him, lending him strength he might not have otherwise had. Bouncers were moved aside. When one tried to bar his path, he cuffed the man on the jaw and laid him out flat. He paid no heed to the chair facing away from him. His anger burned too hot, too bright, to even consider the ramifications of what might happen after this. By the time it did, it was already too late to step back. He buelled forward instead. I lost 6 officers. He slammed a bloody badge down on the desk. 6. They pushed it too far this time. The council's up in arms. The chair turned. And the world stopped. His fury guttered out. Because you see, Silco wasn't sitting in it. His son was. Sit down, Marcus. Naruto swept a hand to the seat opposite him. We have a lot to discuss. He squared his shoulders. I'll do no such thing. A hand hit his shoulder from behind. It wasn't a request. Marcus made the mistake of looking back. Then, a familiar face smiled at him. Wait, why were there 2 of him now? No. Not important. This man and that little floozy of his had killed 6 enforcers. There must be BLD for this. Anything less would spit on the memory of those brave men and women. You're a monster. He tried to surge upright, only for those strange copies to hold him back by the shoulders. Those were my enforcers. They were good men and women, fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, and we killed them. I make no excuses for it. Naruto bobbed his head, contrition flashing across his face. It's not something I'm proud of. I think my team would have been ashamed to see what I've become. Friends. I'm speaking in the past tense, of course. He held up a finger, and as Marcus looked on, a tiny blue sphere sparked to life upon the outstretched digit. It danced there, a candle in the wind, before he blew it out. But while we're on the topic, let's talk about yours, shall we? Marcus gnashed his teeth, clinging onto his anger even as it slipped. I'm afraid I don't understand. Naruto rolled his eyes. Of course you don't. Silco knows about this. He's the one who gave me permission to set up this little meeting in the first pulse. A pause as he regarded him. Granted, that was before last night's incursion, but still. Let's lay our cards on the table. Clasping both hands before him, the blonde leaned back in his borrowed chair, reclining like some long-lost king. I have a few questions for you. You're going to answer them. And if I refuse, we don't need to be enemies, Marcus. A hand drummed against the desk. Tell me what I want to know, and I'll be on my way. His gaze strayed into the shadows, half expecting that crazy girl to leap out. When she didn't, he gulped. Where is she? Jinx, eyes occupied. Naruto's smile was thin. And likely breaking the news to the old man, 6 enforcers dead. Enforcers dead, Jinx grinned. Yeah. A building blown to pieces. Her head bobbed. You updid that. Do you have any idea what you've done? Actually, Jinx held up her prized gemstone. I do. Look what we got. All of Silco's anger withered away. But enough about her. Let's talk about you. It was the way he said those words that chilled Marcus. Not the DLVY wrath era lack thereof. No fear. No hesitation. Cold confidence personified. A statement of neither anger nor rage but rather simple disappointment, as though he'd somehow expected more of him and been left wanting. Why did you do it? A seed of fear sprouted in the sheriff's heart. This was going to end poorly, wasn't it? Do what? Your father needs me. He spoke quickly, stumbling over the words in his haste to explain himself. We've accomplished a lot together, Marcus. Sheriff. He leaned forward. I had hoped you would continue to remain a part of it. Marcus found himself blinking, somewhat taken aback by the word. I beg your pardon. Gun. He should have brought his gun. I really wanted us to get along, you know? Naruto's expression didn't waver, not an inch. We could have been such good friends, you and I. But you've been keeping secrets. A finger wagged at him. More than that, he leaned forward, eyes aglow in the low light, embezzling funds, taking bribes, playing both sides, and not just for you. See, we've been protecting someone. All this time. Light fled from the sheriff's face, bleeding into a dark pit in his stomach. I know what you're talking about. And now you're playing the fool. Naruto wagged a finger at him again. He'd changed gears. Hell, he was speaking like the old man now, Silco made manifest. If you're going to be like this, then of what use are you? I thought you'd at least be competent. Anger had him surging to his feet. I don't have to listen to this, you little something dark flashed across the blonde's face. Sit down, Marcus. We're not finished. His knees buckled, resolve faltering in the face of that cold look. It was like gazing into the abyss. And the abyss stared back. Naruto waved his free hand and another copy of himself materialized from the shadows to deposit a heavy manila folder on the desk. It landed with a heavy thud. Naruto murmured his thanks and began to leaf through it as one might an old book. Marcus shied back from it with a grimace. I looked into you, Sheriff, his tormentor prattled on. Quite the past you've had. And look where it's led you. Don't speak. He hissed at himself. Don't give the little any more ammunition. I began to notice things. He stabbed a finger down on one image among the others. Frequent trips to Stillwater prison. Not to drop off prisoners. No. Those whisked cheeks dimpled in a scowl. Every 3 months you swing by here. Like clockwork. He knew. Or suspected at the very least. Whatever you think I'm doing. He paused, choosing his words with infinite care. You're mistaken? Oh. He jolted as a hand came down crashing down to rattle the desk. It is you who are mistaken, Marcus. About a great many things. The young man before him continued to smile, but it was sharper now, and it no longer reached his eyes. Tell me about Jinx's sister. Don't spare a single detail. Because if you lie, well, he reached below the desk. A knife came out, laid blade first toward him. That would make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry. You can't do this. Can. Naruto drawled. His throat began to close. I have a daughter, so you do. Naruto's head bobbed in faux agreement. Adorable little thing, that one. You would do anything for your daughter, wouldn't you, Marcus? Just as I'd do anything for Jinx. His smile seemed almost sad just then. I respect that. You would climb any mountain for her, delve to any depths if that meant keeping her safe. You'd make a deal with the devil, so long as she could live a happy life. Is that a threat? A blonde brow quirked. What do you think it is? I know what it's like to be an orphan. The whiskered warrior stood abruptly, circling the desk to meet him. The pain, the loneliness, the hunger well. He toothed once and patted his shoulder, brushing away a bit of dust there. It's not a fate I'd wish on my worst enemy. Rest assured, no matter what happens here, I'll see her looked after. But before that Marcus was still trying to think of a way out when Naruto threw an elbow into his solar plexus. Breath burst from his lungs and he doubled over with a wheeze. Firm fingers caught him by the hair and ripped him upright, tearing at his scalp. He reared back and struck him. BLD splashed across the floor. Naruto closed his blue eyes. We all have a monster inside us, Marcus. They opened again a heartbeat later, bearing sinister scarlet slits. It's time to let the monster out. Marcus slammed backward. I don't know anything. She's dead, I swear. Red eyes locked on him. Swear to me, Caitlyn considered the web of red strings before her. It was all connected somehow. The raid, the attack, the theft of the jewel. She was a Kiraman. She would persevere. She would find a way. It was all she knew. Realization dawned. The Firelights. Were they the key to this? And if so, how to find the Firelights? The answer dawned quickly. Where else would criminals be kept? She's back. 2 little words, and yet they threatened to rip the rug right out from under Silco. Under any other circumstance he might have found it remarkable if he weren't so bloody furious. Cigar creaked ominously in his grip, but he forced himself to breathe, to inhale and let the smoke fill his lungs as the water had so long ago. He exhaled slowly, deliberately, willing the anger to depart with it. Only then, once he was calm, did he dare to raise his gaze and give an answer. From the dead. Not quite. A folder slid across his desk. Naruto flopped down beside it with a sigh. Your little sheriff sang like a canary once I put the screws to him. That sister of hers. She's alive. Silco listened with half an ear as he leafed through the documents. They painted a damning tale. Marcus had been dirty to begin with, but he'd had his uses. The information before him painted a damning picture of the already corrupt sheriff, one he suspected wouldn't live much longer. His dark eye flitted toward Naruto. Did you leave him in one piece? A blonde brow quirked. Did you expect anything less? He sighed. Of course not. Where's Jinx? Occupied with Seva. He waved a hand absently as he flipped to another page. Something about explosions and braiding hair. Naruto winced. Poor girl, at least they're getting along now. Speaking of along, Silco twitched at the reminder, what the two of you did last night. That was reckless. His boy crossed both arms before his E. There was a reason for it, old man. And I'm sure you'll tell me all about it momentarily. That aside, they had another problem to deal with. Vi Vander's girl. A ghost, thought long buried, back from the dead. Jinx would never forgive him for this. She'd think him a liar. But he hadn't known. That Naruto had been able to ferret out the information so quickly bothered him more than he cared to admit. Were you tempted to lie? Blue eyes rolled. Not even a little. You do realize she cannot be allowed to resurface? See, you say that, Butts. The boy rolled over, tucked both legs beneath him to sat up. Rocking back and forth on his haunches, he glowered at him. Dad, if you try to bury this, it's gonna blow up in your face. His left hand mimed an explosion, fingers flailing. So don't bury it. Use it. He knew that tone. Lad had learned his lessons well. What do you propose? Go and tell Jinx what I just told you. He stopped rocking long enough to favor him with a grim look. Make it clear that Marcus was behind her disappearance. Not you. Easier said than done. Jinx had believed her sister dead for years. They all had. To suddenly be confronted with the possibility that she wasn't, she'll break down. She's already breaking down, Naruto snarled, the first true sign of anger he'd seen from him in quite some time. Her nightmares are getting worse every day. She thinks you don't believe in her anymore. A finger hit his collarbone. That she's weak, dismay dawned. I said no such thing. Doesn't matter what you said. Blue eyes rolled. You know how she is. You need to tell her. Explain it to her. Otherwise she'll go stir crazy. She wanted to prove herself. I favor that chance. Father and son stared one another down. Eventually, the latter yielded. I know you want to protect her. Naruto leaned back at last. I do. More than anything. But if you keep this from her and she finds out, she'll hate you. An unfamiliar feeling gnawed at Silco's itchy. He disliked it. And you. Me. That drew a blink from the boy. I could never hate you. Sure, I'd be disappointed, but hate. Nope. He shook his head and smiled. No can do. After all, you'd never betray us. He wouldn't. The sudden realization humbled Silco. When had he come undone? Jinx, her sister, she was fond of her. I know. Naruto clapped him on the shoulder. She told me. I killed her father. Vander's BLD is on my hands. Know that too. Do you regret it? The silence was his answer. There you go, brat. He half-heartedly slapped his arm. If it comes to a fight, who will you choose? Naruto tilted his head. Do you really have to ask? I want to hear it. He needed to. You, of course. The boy stuck out his tongue. Thought that was obvious. Why would I take the side of some crazy pink girl? A thorn of confusion pricked at his black heart. And yet you want Jinx to be reunited with her? I do, because I want her to get over her. His smile slipped away like water off a duck's back. She told me everything. Vi hit her, called her Jinx, then left her to rot. A low note of fury crawled into his words, bubbling up like so much red chakra. Family doesn't do that. I want Jinx to meet her, sure, but then I want to smack that no-good bitch upside the head for what she did. His reasons weren't as altruistic as he thought. Then, you feel that strongly about it, do you? You and Jinx are both family to me. A shrug. She ain't. You know I never knew my parents. Hell, guileless blue eyes gazed up at him. You're probably the closest thing I've had to a dad. And what of Jinx? Naruto looked away. What about her? He really was too easy to read. You care for her, don't you? Yeah. Naruto looked away to hide the head in his cheeks. I think I do. Silco found he had no qualms against it. They were hardly related by BLD after all. If two troubled teenagers wanted to take comfort in one another, then who was he to stop them? Let them be happy. They'd all be far, far better off once this loose end was snipped. She'll choose you. There was no room for doubt in those words. You took her in when no one else did. Raised her. Gave her a home. You're her family too. Same as me. The boy gave him too much credit. His motives hadn't been at all altruistic at first. Things had changed. He sighed. I started the chain of events that led to her losing everything in the first place. Maybe so, but you're a better man now. You feel guilt. That makes you good. He really wasn't. Softer, weaker, more prone to sentiment perhaps. Only a few years ago he would have scoffed at the very notion of it all. Really, raising two children. Only a fool would do such. Love was a weakness, chains to hold one back. Just like that, the onus of choice was in his hands. He planted a palm on his head with a sigh. Tell her. The hope in Naruto's eyes was almost too painful for him to behold. Great, after I see her myself. His son scowled. You won't try to kill her? No. And he wouldn't. But he wasn't above having a few words with her. Convincing her to stay behind bars, warning her of what her fate would be should she ever dare venture beyond them. After all, whose side would Jinx take, her family, or that of some madwoman in a cell? He wanted to believe he knew the answer. He really did. Naruto hopped off the desk, grinning from ear to ear. I'm going with you. Who's going where with what, now? Silco's soul stilled. Naruto craned his neck with a forlorn sigh. Both saw Jinx, now poking her head through the doorway as a curious child might. Guileless blue eye blinked back at them as she raised a glass of water to her lips. Silco wanted to believe it was water, but the faint scent of whiskey said otherwise. I thought you were out with Seva? Yeah, but some guy barged into the last drop, said there was a big prison break in Stillwater. She drained the glass and flung it over her shoulder, leaving it to shatter over a wall. Firelights and stuff. Though you'd want to know. Don't we got people in there? Silco's BLD ran cold as an ice flow. Come again. Dunno. Some Kiraman lady caused it. That a big name or something? Silco and Naruto exchanged a glance. Sharing the same thought, the same emotion in an instant. Wait a minute. You were talking about something else, weren't you? Jinx whimpered like the little girl she wasn't. You wouldn't lie to me, right? Silco bit down on a snarl. Blast that girl's sister. How could one brat cause so many problems? Come here. Naruto waved her forward. There's something we need to tell you. Jinx stepped into his arms without hesitation and nuzzled close. All right, she beamed at him. I'm listening. What you got? The words that followed would break her heart. Everyone fears something. But when you let that fear consume you, drive you mad, what do you become? What we fear was alive. Ain't it crazy how 3 little words can pull the rug right out from under you? The sister she'd lost, now the sister she'd found. Sister, thought she'd missed her. It was almost too good to be true. When they told her, she'd not wanted to believe at first. From anyone else she wouldn't have. But they hadn't lied. Family didn't lie. But now here she was, stuck on this bloody blasted bobbing boat. Wasn't that a tongue twister? And already wanting off. She wasn't seasick. Nope. No way. Not a chance. Stillwater prison loomed before them in the distance, silent as the grave. No lights. No boats at the pier. Not a soul. It was dead and dark after the riot. She wasn't sure why the sight bothered her so. A prison was just a prison, and it wasn't as if they were going to stay lone. A mournful breeze whipped through her hair from the dock. It almost sounded like a scream. Jinx shivered, rubbing at her arms. This is a bad place. Her voices babbled at her. We shouldn't be here. She stuffed them into a little box and forced herself to sit down a bench. The boat rocked beneath her and she felt her gorge rise in her stomach. No. She wasn't going to get sick again. The crew were already giving her funny looks after her last episode. Just calm down. She muttered to herself. It's fine. Everything's gonna be fine. Silco had agreed to wait back at the last drop, likely to keep her from freaking out. She got that, appreciated it, even. The old man was all right. He knew she was fraying at the seams, so he trusted Naruto with this task in his stead. But she didn't think she could face him right now, much less what lay ahead. Are you ready? A hand came down on her shoulder and she jumped with a yelp. Gosh, she rounded on Naruto with a hiss. Don't do that, how are you so calm anyway? Been on a ship once or twice, he walked away with easy grace, from bow to stern, forcing her to follow, then back again. Remind me to tell you about the land of snow sometime. When he plunked down on a seat she joined him, nestling against him for warmth. Naruto was handy with his disguises. She still didn't know how this chakra thing of his worked, but it was damn handy. He could even disguise others now to an extent. A good strong shove would tear through the illusion, but otherwise it would hold. Right now, she didn't care about any of that. She melted into his side, seeking comfort. It's just I wish I knew. There was something in his tone just now. She didn't like it. We'll see soon enough. Her brow furrowed and she glared his way. What's that supposed to mean? He blew out an angry breath. I left you, Jinx. She flinched. Yeah, but what? He tilted his head, and the anger in his face chilled her blood. If only because she knew it wasn't directed at her. None of it was. I would have killed to have a big sister as a kid. Someone to rely on, someone to look up to, someone to trust, and he tore his gaze away and slammed a fist down on the rail. She left you. Threw you away. What kind of sister does that? Not a good sister. It went without saying. But even so, if she was alive after all this time, the voices gnawed at her. What does it matter? She'll just leave again. Shut up, she spat at them. Then more softly, you won't, right? Leave me, An arm looped around her waist. Never. Jinx felt herself shiver a little. She couldn't keep herself from cuddling closer to him. There it was, the fervor in his voice, his words burning with dark promise, more powerful than Vi had ever been. Naruto kept his word. Boys. Come hell or high water. No broken promises here. She knew he'd rather die than betray her. In that at least, she could take some small solace. He'd never betray her. Not like Vi. Betrayal. The memory of it threatened to eat her alive. I'm scared, it all came bubbling back up now, all her fear, all her anger, all those bad memories escaping her in a sudden rush. Why did you leave me? A child's voice, Powder's voice wailing in the rain. Furious fingers biting into her face. Because you're a Jinx, she bit her lip until she tasted blood. The acrid tang calmed her. What if she doesn't recognize me? What? She tucked her knees into her feet and hid her head behind them. What if she doesn't want me? What if she still hates me? Naruto scoffed. Then I'll kick her butt? There was a pause now as he thumbed his chin. On second thought, might do that either way? A tiny smile touched her lips, breaking through the fear. Naruto, no. No, what? His grin grew impish as he leaned back. I'm not gonna kill her or anything like that. I just want to talk her. He began to crack his knuckles, drawing worried looks from the crew, loudly. Repeatedly. With my fists, maybe my boots, and quite possibly with laughter bubbled up in her as she batted at him. You really would, wouldn't you? In a heartbeat. She breaks your heart. I break her. Comfortable silence stretched between them, broken only by waves lapping against the hull. This trip might be for nothing, you know. He said suddenly, breaking their tableau. She could have escaped by now. A free-zone tension shot through the air between them, bringing her voices back to life. Jinx shivered into it and they pounced upon her. Left you, gone already, probably wants you dead. No, she rasped, tossing her head side to side with such force that she smacked him with her braids. She has to be here. You said she was here. Yeah, but that was before we knew about the riot. He craned his neck back, their destination nearly in sight as the captain brought them in. If she had any sense, she would have bolted by now. Best we can hope for is a chance pick up her trail after we blow this place sky high. You can track her, right? Yeah, his head bobbed. I want to find her just as badly as you do. I've got questions for her. The silence grew strained now, a rubber band ready to snap. What do you want, Jinx? Naruto sighed at last. I can't answer that question for you. I wish I could. I want nothing more than to tell you what to do here. But I can't. He held her close, forehead touching hers. Look deep inside yourself and tell me, What exactly is it you hope to gain from this? Family. You already have one. You always will. No matter what happens here today. Right, sure? She changed subjects before he could press her further. Still, it's kinda quiet out here for a prison, she ribbed him with an elbow. Think there's ghosts? Naruto shivered. Hopefully not, SHT. You're scared of ghosts, ain't ya? He gave her a dour look. How nice of you to remember. Could be worse. He flung up his arms. A shrug. Place could be filled with zombies. I'll take zombies any day. Naruto glared over the water and spat into it. Zombies die eventually. Can't kill ghosts. Jinx had been right about one thing. Stillwater was too quiet. Far too quiet. Considering it was Piltover's premier prison, one might have thought it would be swarming with guards. Indeed, they'd prepared disguises for just such an eventuality. It would have been a grand entrance. Him, Jinx, and no less than 9 of Silco's finest slipping in and out with the prisoner with Vi, and none would have been the wiser. They would have thought them enforcers, fallen for the ruse hook like and sinker, until those so-called enforcers turned on them from within. None of them would have noticed the explosives they brought, nor their intentions until it was too late. There was no need. No need for disguises, because there was no one to fool. A chill shot down Naruto's spine as he surveyed the carnage before them. Bodies lay sprawled out on the docks, scattered like so many fallen leaves. Enforcers. Prisoners. Civilians. BLD ran freely across wood and stones alike. Still more bodies bobbed in the water, attracting sharks from the deeper waters. And yet there were no boats at the dock save theirs. Had some managed to flee? Keep the engine warm. He dropped a handful of coins into the captain's waiting hand. We'll be back. The man, an old sea dog with white hair, grunted once, but took the money. Don't feel right this. Who would kill this many people? Naruto craned his neck. Seems we're about to find out. Hey look. Jinx waltzed past him with a whistle. They left the door open for us. Naruto turned to find the entrance to the prison was left wide open, yawning to the depths below. Not a single light to be seen. Jinx slipped ahead of him, and he grabbed her by the wrist, yanking her back. Stay with me. Boo, she sulked but didn't disobey. Naruto snapped his fingers once. Torches. Silco's men kicked up flashlights and in they went. Not 3 paces in, the warden lay sprawled beside his desk, what was left of him. Ripped and torn. He gagged and turned away. Someone had the decency to throw their cloak over his corpse. Good of them. Ultimately a futile effort, yet kind still. The head of the prison had been a rather large man, but not even the flies had come near this crimson cadaver. Almost as if they were afraid of something. A circuit breaker fizzled and spat near the elevator, spraying sparks onto his corpse. They found the fuse clutched tight in the warden's fist, fingers frozen in death. He must have ripped it out. No one wanted to ask why he'd done such a thing. Still, it was easy enough to fix. They had it up and running in less than a minute. Naruto couldn't help but frown at it all. Wonder why they did this. One of the goons shrugged as they fiddled with the wires. Maybe they wanted to keep the prisoners in. Naruto nearly agreed, but a thorn of doubt held him back. No, there was more at work here, more than met the eye. Fat load of good that did him, another muttered, stealing a glance at the corpse. I know there's some strong people in here, but this. Nah, never mind. I don't get paid enough to ask. Jinx nudged him. So, we going down or what? Naruto heaved a sigh. Someone find the prisoner ledger first. I don't want to wander around blindly. In short order they found it the description they were after. A prisoner with pink hair. Jinx sucked in a breath. He smiled for her sake as much as his. Right there she is. He tapped the number. She's down on one of the lower levels, near the CAF. We go in, we get her out, assuming she's still here, then we get the hell out. Flicking a glance over his shoulder, he chose 2 men and 1 woman out of the 9. Bruno, Soizi, Shiva. He rattled their names off as they unlimbered their packs. Set the charges topside. You stay and guard the elevator, don't let anyone get by, you understand. They seemed almost grateful for the assignment. And for the love of God, do not use your detonators until we're away. Understood. A chorus of nods and eyes went up. The rest of them piled into the elevator, struggling into its cramped confines. Down they went, numbers ticking, chains rattling as they descended into the depths. It felt like they were headed into the bowels of the underworld itself. It only got worse when they reached the bottom. There was some vague illumination in the prison, but faint, emergency lighting bathing all the world in a ruddy red glow. It almost reminded him of the fox's chakra, but darker. Tainted. And yet for all that, there were no bodies down here. Not a singed corpse. Someone muttered something behind him and made a sign to ward off evil. I don't like this, boss. It's too quiet. Me neither. Naruto hefted his gauntlet, ignoring the little thrill of fear he felt. Fan out. Don't go far. Jinx squirmed out beside him, pistol in hand. What are you afraid of? The dark. Let's go. Pain stabbed into his head, bringing him up short. Run. No. His brow furrowed and he brought his unarmed hand up to cup his head. What are you on about? There's something here, something that shouldn't be. You're not ready to face it. Get your butt back up that elevator. It was a rare day indeed when his guest wanted to mouth off to him. What are you afraid of? Not afraid, the low voice answered. Not for me. For you. Since when do you give a SHT about me? Since you're about to die. Ah, he was lying. Wasn't he? Right, Naruto looked back at the ledger, squinting in the low light. She's in cell block 40. Shouldn't be too fair if she's still here. He did his best to ignore Jinx's scowl. If she isn't, we set our charges and get out before reinforcements. Got it. Another series of grunts answered him. Together, their group ventured forth. Naruto found his teeth clenching with every step. Too many tight corners. And still no bodies. No signs of life, either. Not even BLD. There had at least been remains of the riot up top on the docks, but down here it was just cold. Like the void. Powder. A voice called out in the dark ahead of them suddenly. Faint. Distant. Little more than a whisper. Is that you? Vi. Jinx whirled toward the sound, eyes gone wide with hope and fear. I'm here. Naruto reached out to grab her, but she eeled through his fingers. Wait. This way, she hollered, braids bouncing over her shoulder. Naruto raced after her. Brats, the agony in his skull intensified tenfold, bringing him up short. If you don't turn around right now, I swear I won't be held responsible. Something skittered ahead of them. Steel dragged across the floor. He rounded a corner, found her standing before a gangly figure in an open room filled with tables. It just hung there. Strange-looking thing. Like someone had smuggled a scarecrow into what must have been a cafeteria, nailed it down, then left. Jinx prodded its iste without fear, heedless of anything else. Where did you come from? He heard her mutter. Weird-looking thing. Naruto's sixth sense was no longer hissing. Now it was shrieking. Jinx, get away from there. See, heedless of laughed and turned to face him, hands clasped behind her back. It's just a scarecrow. Nothing to be afraid of. Wonder who brought it down here. Somebody's got a freaky fashion sense. The scarecrow moved behind her. Little more than a twitch in Naruto's, but he saw it. Jinx didn't. Was he imagining things? A trick of the light, perhaps? He didn't believe in coincidences. His BLD ran cold, even as one of his soldiers whimpered behind him. Calm down. Don't panic. He scooted closer and held out a hand, trusting to his instincts. Come here. Walk towards me. Right now. Sure, she shrugged and started his way a lazy gait. You're being awful weird today. A shadow fell over her, followed by a low rasp. She froze. The inks was still speaking when it pounced on her back, bearing her down in a storm of teeth and metal and crows. Blue eyes snapped into scarlet. The world went with it. Naruto lunged, even as she cried out in pain. Caustic crimson claws cracked out like a WHP, grabbing the beast's jaws and wrenching them apart before it could bite down on her neck. It recoiled with a shriek of surprise, warding its face with a long limb to bat him aside. A bloodied Jinx kicked out, scrambling back on all fours like a drunken crab to safety. Naruto stepped in and swung when it went for her again, only to be met by a storm of crows. It swept past them both, seeking easier prey. Silco's men unloaded their guns in a panic. What the hell is that thing? Twitching, it turned towards them with a low rasp and answered. Fiddlesticks, that gangly monstrosity drank in their fear and scrambled, babbling inanities. It surged forward, screaming like the damned. It ran on the floor, the walls, then the ceiling, then the walls again, crawling and crawling and crawling, always just out of harm's way. It fell upon one man and rent him to pieces. Another was torn apart before the rest could even react. A plucky soul tried to rush it with a sword and was promptly hacked apart for her troubles. A fourth was caught by its teeming arms before he could reach them. For dead in as many seconds. 2 remained. Chakra rounds, damn it, Naruto hollered at the survivors. Use the chakra rounds, burn it. Tittering like a mad animal, the beast pivoted toward them. Jinx, all your fault, she seemed to shrink under the words, recoiling. Oi, Fox, what is that thing? Something old. Very old. You can't kill it. Don't even try. Really? He swiped at it, only for it to become a flock of birds again. Rusty steel flicked out, tearing a rent in his back. Why didn't you warn me? I did. You buled on ahead anyway. Best you can do is exorcise it. He raked a claw across its eye. A little late for that's fine. Do you trust me? He slammed it away and it clambered up again. Not at all angry red rounds spattered off its face, eliciting a slight flinch. Beady red eyes snapped to the gunners. Fiahor, the survivors broke ranks and fled through the corridors back toward the elevator. They were run down before they made it. Beady red eyes gleamed in the dark, focused on them. Jinx howled at and opened fire, Gatling gun barking, no avail. Hey, you want fear? I'll show you fear. Chakra bubbled up from the pit of his stomach, and for once Naruto embraced it. Come here, he growled, voice warping, teeth gone sharp, eyes blazing red. I've got a feast for you. He stalked forward, yanked Jinx behind him, and put himself squarely in the beast's path. It didn't even hesitate. Build sprayed as it slashed down at his shoulder. The moment it made contact, he caught its spindly wrist and reeled it in like a fish on a hook. Wrapping his arm around it, he pulled. Raerg, a roar tore out of him as he drove a vermilion Rasengan onto what passed for its. The beast buckled. Crimson chakra burst from its back, but it didn't die. Countless limbs slashed at him in a frothing frenzy, seeking only death, only BLD, only pain. Sorry, Sakura. It rasped at him, mocking him. Couldn't keep me promise. His world went red. Shut up, he lashed out again in a brutal punch, and this time the creature keened in pain as demonic chakra tore its body asunder. Twice. On the third its head bobbed low and he got a hold of it. Wrestling it down, he glared at what passed for a hateful eye, forcing it to look him square in the face. Listen, you, I don't know what you are and I don't care. He flung it down and stomped on its bladed back, shattering the construct. You don't get to feed on her fear. A single tail of Shaka boiled behind him. Or mine, you hear me? 2 tails now. Claws flicked out, obliterating his right eye. It boiled back a heartbeat later and he slammed it into a wall in recompense. Hate bubbled up in him, swallowing his fear. He'd been afraid of this thing. It seemed so tiny now compared to the power he wielded. Puny even. Hey, what's the matter? Naruto leaned over the abomination with a frown. You're not done already, are you? I thought a monster was tougher than this. Groaning, the beast tried to force itself upright. Try being the operative word. Red eyes creased in a smile. That's it. Come on, try harder. He stomped down on their face. It cut into him. He healed as a third tail bloomed in the cloak. You think you're scary? He stabbed a hand into its and found purchase on the darkness there, the essence controlling it, felt it quaver in his grasp. You have no idea. Scram-clawed fingers tightened around it, and the construct shattered. A dark wisp of something shot through his fist and into the ceiling. He gave it an evil eye, then incinerated the scarecrow's remains for good measure. If it had been a spirit, it wouldn't have anything to possess now. Jinx stumbled his way, eyes wide. Whiskersis that you can. He pulled Jinx close. She recoiled, hissing in pain when he touched her. Now it was Naruto's turn to flinch. He didn't want to be seen like this. But he had no choice. It was all right now. That thing was gone, they could find her blasted sister, and finish what he'd started. Calm down. Deep breaths. Let the cloak fade. Sorry. He held up his palms, glowering at the cloak shielding them. I can't hold you like this. Stillwater's ceiling erupted overhead. His world went black. Reality swam back with a start. Blue eyes burst open with a start. He tried to rise. Rubble pressed down into his spine, weighing him in place. His first thought was filled with rage. Those idiots. They detonated the charges. But what? He told them not to know. Somewhere in the smoke he could hear Jinx crying. No, he could see her now, sprawled out beside him, whimpering in pain, pinned by something even worse, shoulder run through by a metal beam. BLD pooled beneath her in vivid relief as she gasped for air. Not like this. Footsteps drew closer in the haze. Find the intruders, a furious snapped. Finish them off. He understood now. Reinforcements had come. And they weren't theirs. It was a trap. He caught sight of an enforcer in the smog, all heavy armor and raspy breath behind their helm. They didn't see him, not yet, but they would soon. Jinx was in no shape to defend herself. He wasn't much better. Not now. Groaning, he planted his palms on the ground and heaved, ignoring his wounds, the rebar piercing his stomach and legs. The rubble gave way to his desperate strength, but slowly. Not fast enough. He needed more power. Now power. Something snapped in the back of his mind and he heard him. Fine. I wasn't satisfied, anyway. Blue eyes boiled red anew. Scarlet light flooded up at his command, rising from his stomach, and quite suddenly, the seemingly immovable rubble weighed no more than a feather's brush. He shrugged it aside with a snarl and stumbled her way. Bleeding. Had to stop the bleeding. He wasn't healing fast enough. Protect her. Had to protect her. Jinx wasn't moving when he reached her. Her head lolled to one side as he picked her up. You're all right. He knelt, holding her still form. I can fix this. A desperate shake rattled her frail shoulders. Just hold on, please. Don't leave me alone. An enforcer waded through the smoke, baton in hand. Saw a humanoid silhouette. Something struck him, sending him slamming back out the door in a twisted mass of arms and legs. Another shuffled forward, unwilling to risk himself, his fellows shying back as they realized their victims still had some fight in them. Silence stretched into oblivion. And then, something screamed. Someone. Not again. That was their only warning. Then a beast stalked through the smoke. Do what must be done. Do not hesitate. Show no mercy. Rip and tear, my son. Until it is done. Until it is done. Hold tight, this has gone too far. Silco's glass struck the floor and shattered into a dozen pieces. Wine spattered the carpet, staining his shoes a ghastly shade of crimson. The stains would never come out. He ignored them, good eye blazing upon the man before him, or rather, the pistol pressed against his eye. At this range he had no chance to dodge. It would be a clean shot, he knew. A single round through his heart would spell the end of him. One shot. One kill, and likewise, a quick death. Almost poetic, really. Yet he did not flinch in the face of his impending demise nor this betrayal. After so long he'd grown accustomed to such. Learned to anticipate it, even. It was in mankind's very nature to betray their fellows, to backstab those in power, drag those above them down the ladder of chaos, drown those who sought in turn to drown them. He'd always known he too would be betrayed someday, sooner or later. He'd feared such treachery would come at the hands of those he came for. Knowing did little to lessen the sting. In hindsight, his prayers had been answered. What is the meaning of this? Because you see, this particularly betrayal had not come at the hands of neither Naruto nor Jinx. Instead it came from someone he'd given precious little thought to lately. Largely inconsequential to the grander scheme of things, yet still useful all the same. He'd underestimated them, and in return, they'd overestimated their own self-importance. Sheriff. He should have known Marcus would turn eventually. The fool was bound to find his spine sooner or later. Naruto's interrogation must have pushed him too far. Pity. He'd been a useful sort. And yet for all that he didn't pull the trigger. Even now, he hesitated. Such weakness. Imagining yourself the hero. Silco quirked a brow in spite of his own hammering heart. One final act to make yourself the martyr you've always seen yourself as. Let me help you. He reached up, gripped the barrel, and held it steady. With the other he drew him in close. What are you waiting for? You think you'll get out of this, don't you? He wasn't prepared for the little worm's response. Your kids won't be coming to save you. Not this time. That tone, he didn't much like it. His good eye narrowed. What have you done? What was needed? What was necessary? His killer scoffed, mustache twitching in thinly veiled rage. I've had enough of you and your brats. That blonde BSTRD especially. They'll die in the trap I set for them in Stillwater, and you'll die here. Then this will all be over. His finger tightened around the trigger. Today's the day you die, Silco. So be it. If this was his time, then he would meet the Reaper gladly. That's a risk I've known all my life. He smiled serenely, closed his good eye, and looked up at the ceiling high above. But I still believe in loyalty. Unlike you. Stop acting tough, the pistol trembled against his ear. You're not going to survive this, neither will you what? Truth is a matter of perspective, he continued, smiled into the rafters, steeling himself for what was to come. Whether I die today or not is irrelevant. My legacy survives. But you. That lopsided smirk stretched the length of his scarred face. Here at last he looked down, lips quirking in a small, disappointed sigh. Whatever will your daughter think once she realizes Daddy Dearest is nothing better than the filth she fears. It was the last straw. The pistol barked. BLD ran freely with the wine. Silco sighed softly in the ginsmoke that followed. I would have had your daughter killed for this, but I suppose I can be merciful. Your life will suffice. Marcus looked down with a frown. Coughed. Blinked now, at the slender blade protruding from his eye. It was a perfectly good stab, through and through, so close that the blade tickled Silco's. A thin line of BLD leaked from the sheriff's lips. Ran the length of his jaw. Dribbled down his pale chin. The sheriff looked up again, unable to understand what just transpired. He was still staring at Silco, still blinking, trying to speak, when his killer ripped their weapon free from his back, planted a palm between his shoulders and shoved. His body pitched forward, dead before he hit the floor. Seva stepped over him. Nasty bit of business, that. Should have seen it coming. Silco ran a hand over his face, stifled a sigh, and willed his hammering heart to still. Yes, he should have seen such. There had been a moment there. A second in which he genuinely feared for his life. He'd been all of an instant from crushing the vial hidden up in his sleeve and unleashing the stored shaka within into his bloodstream. An act of desperation, and one that might have doomed him as much as saved him. Who knew what that would have done to his body? Stalking over to his desk, he plugged a cigar from the tray Jinx had fashioned for him, lit it, and took a long drag. Perhaps he would die someday. But not this day. Were you tempted? His second was all smiles as she disposed of the sheriff's corpse. Not for a worm like him. But he won't be the last. Silco smiled at her remark. It was a pained thing indeed. Once you're done, head over to Stillwater. Make sure they're all right, the beast raged. Anger was all he knew, spite all he felt. Dim in it. Dim in him. Dim in them all to the blackest pit. The living monstrosity waged forward, white eyes wild, for tails lashing at the enforcers. They fired upon him to no avail. Bullets didn't even tickle his hide. His claws did far more than that. On and on he stalked, his BLD rotting, corpse after corpse in his wake as he awaited what? What was he waiting for? An itch stirred in the back of the beast's brain. He was waiting for something. It was very important that he not stray from her body. But there were so many people. They some tried to flee. He gave those a head start before he hunted them down. Their fear fed him. Had to stop. Needed to stop cold and stop. Why stop? She was gone. Everything was ash. The brief flicker of sanity faded, taking the last of his world with it. And the Jinchuriki howled anew, screamed one word. Jinx, wanibody get the number of that anvil? Jinx opened her eyes with a groan and gasped out a breath. But she felt like death. No, maybe she was death. Silly thought. Silence reigned supreme in the prison as she pushed herself upright on one arm. That was weird. Usually the voices were whispering by now. Instead it was quiet. Or had she gone deaf? Blast might've knocked out her eardrums for a bit. That was bad, right? Now that she focused, she could hear an awful ringing interposed over everything else. So why didn't she feel anything? And why was the floor shaking? Grimacing, she rolled over. Her body didn't much like that. Agony sang through her right shoulder, dislocated or broken. She wasn't sure. Only one way to find. She forced her right hand to open, uncurling from a tight, clenched fist. A tiny vial crumbled in her open palm, turning to so much dust as she looked on. Flickering lights of red and blue crawled through her palm. Cooing softly, she watched them thread down her arm, healing the lacerations there, the last of her injuries perfecting themselves before her aching eyes. She looked down. Saw the BLD. Well, that explained the rush. Right. Chakra vial. Pretty potent stuff. Must have saved her life. Singe did good work. Still, she was almost disappointed. She'd been saving it for a rainy day. Wait, wasn't this stuff supposed to be super addictive? There was a reason she'd not used it until now. Booed, she pursed her lips in a pout. I didn't even get to feel the high A shadow fell over her. Jinx froze. Sound rushed back with a pop. Yikes. And she looked up. Crap baskets. Her entire body locked up, and for good reason. She stared into the blank white eyes of a bipedal beast. The beast stared back, looking just as shocked to see her as she was him. For fiery tails flashed behind him, red as BLD, boiling the very air itself. And yet for all that he didn't move. Neither did she. A sane woman would have run the other way. Hollered for help. Done something. Anything. Well, the Jinx hadn't been right in the head for a terribly long time. Sanity was overrated anyway. She recognized him. She wasn't sure how, only that she did. She'd never seen him this far gone before. It was a leap by any stretch of the imagination. Whiskers. That you? He dropped a corpse at her feet. It didn't even look human anymore. She really hoped that was him in there. If not, well, best not dwell. Still the silence stretched on. His brow brewed down, fanged maw parting to speak or bite. Jinx didn't give him a chance to do either, all but lunging up into his arms to embracing him. Pain agony flashed through her at once. The heat of his body didn't just burn. It scalded. The scent of singed flesh flooded her nose and she nearly gagged against it. Not important, she'd felt worse than this. He struggled against her, snarling and spitting. Still she held on. Even as her arms burned raw, she didn't let him go. It's okay, she whispered, uncaring as the burns crept across her cheek. I'm all right. You're all right. We're all right. Breathe. He made a pitiful noise and looked away, ashamed. I'm sorry, called me protect you. You did. Duh. She pulled him closer. Just come back, all right? The cloak bled away. He slumped in her arms with a sob. Jinx held him tight. She always would. I've no more F's to give. What a coincidence, neither do I. Best way to solve a problem is with an explosion, right? Live and learn a living scarecrow. You're certain? Jinx clasped her hands together, silently willing Silco to understand. You have to believe us, and I do. The old man slumped behind his desk and pinched the bridge of his nose, good eye closing in a sigh. It's hardly the strangest thing I've heard of. Frankly, it's too fantastic to be anything but true. At least you didn't have to fight it. Naruto settled into his own seat, looking mildly put out. DMN thing made me go berserk? Silco favored him with a wry smile. Yet here you are. Here they were indeed. Seva had ferried them back to the last drop, but in truth, Jinx, she still felt far from safe. Surely they were back in safe territory while Piltover pondered over the mess in Stillwater, but it didn't change what she'd seen down there in the depths. That thing had known her. All her fears. Her every darkest moment. Worse, she didn't know Jack SHT about whatever IT was. Scarecrows didn't act like that, didn't move like that, and they certainly didn't cut through people like a blender. She'd never forget its eyes, those awful red eyes peering through her very soul. Jinx, all your fault, she stiffed a shiver. It knew. Somehow, it knew her past. All of it. Fiddlesticks. She'd remember that name, even if she wished she couldn't. Hey. Naruto nudged her, pushing her out the dark mire of her thoughts. You alright? Jinx scooted her chair closer and laid her head on his shoulder. As she did, she spied the dark stain upon the floor. It was big. Too big. A distraction was what it was, and she pounced on it, eager to think of something else, anything else save the awful monster haunting her head. She felt Naruto's hand slide the small of her back, and a bit of her tension slipped away. He'd fought that thing. He wouldn't let it hurt her. Not like the others. Her fingers threaded with his, squeezing tight. She luxuriated in the feeling and twined a leg within his, all but leaping out her chair to nestle down in his lap. A blonde brow rose, but he didn't challenge her. An arm loomed round her waist and she felt a pleasant thrill shoot through her. Not a bad distractionness. Maybe if she ignored that awful demon long enough, she'd forget about it. Might not work, but it was a demon's sight better than dwelling on that thing. Suhat happened while we were away. She feigned a grin as she flicked a finger toward the mess. You spill wine or something? Seva snorted behind them. Or something? Silco turned an eye to the dried stain upon the floor. Our dear sheriff thought he could slip his leash? Naruto tilted his head. Not Finn. Silco frowned. Why would you suspect Finn? Her bestie rolled one shoulder and shrugged. Seems the slimy sort? Jinx racked her brain, tried to conjure a face to the name, and failed. Finn, that was the weirdo with the false jaw, right? She'd never liked him. Their foster father didn't challenge that. Regardless, in the end, Marcus got the point. Seva stabbed him, didn't she? Wait, did you just make a joke? Seva sighed and crossed one leg over another. You're terrible. I dunno, Naruto grinned. I kinda like that pun. You would. Laughter bubbled up in the room and Jinx hid a smile behind her hand. Just like that, she felt the last of the tension bleed away. Things were all right. Sure, everyone was a little stressed after today's madness, but things would get better. What was the old saying? It could only go up from here. Yeah, that was it. Be that as it may, Silco took a long drink, then barreled on. Our timetable has moved up once more. With poor Marcus out the picture, we have a brief window of opportunity. I suspect the next sheriff won't be nearly so amenable to our cause nor so pliable. Come tomorrow, I'll need the two of you to pay the Chem Barons a visit. Tell them it's time to ramp up production. Naruto clicked his tongue. They won't like that. It's not a matter of whether they'll like it or not. It needs to be done. The talk dissolved into boring things from there, and Jinx felt herself grow restless. An old worry nagged at her, like a dog with an old bone. She shouldn't say it. She knew she shouldn't. Things were just starting to calm down. If she piped up now, she'd just cause more chaos. She just couldn't help herself. What about Vi? All fell silent. Seva blew out a breathy sigh. This again. Silco ground his cigar down into the ashtray she'd made for him. Naruto closed his eyes. For a moment he almost looked angry. It was masked quickly, but she didn't miss it. Either she and the enforcer girl survived that massacre and escaped, or they didn't. Silco gave her a pitying look. Regardless, I'm certain they'll surface sooner or later. Naruto sat up. And when she does, we shall cross that bridge when we come to it. I'm sure she got away. Panic mounted in her mind and she shoved it down with a nervous giggle. She's out there somewhere. She has to be. Silco neither confirmed nor denied it. Get some rest, the both of you. You've more than earned it. Jinx didn't need to be told twice. She hopped off Naruto's lap and made for the exit with all due speed, practically skipping down the steps. Her body still vibrated with nervous tension, and she found herself equally anxious to bleed it off before the voices piped up again. Something. Anything. Anywhere but here. In her haste, she didn't see Naruto linger the door, nor did she hear Silco's voice. You're certain it's dead? The silence that followed suffocated sense. Naruto shook his head. I destroyed its body. Its spirit escaped. I don't think we've seen the last of it. Fear the loss of a body meant nothing to one such as Fiddlesticks. It would build a new shell of corpses and flesh, of marrow and bone. And it would feed. You awake? Naruto creaked an eye open, gazing dolefully at the ceiling. I am now. Say what you would about Jinx, but she didn't take well to being ignored. He heard the bunk bed below his creak ominously. The silence that followed proved telling. He knew what Jinx was after, that she would wait until he spoke again. She wasn't above revenge if he fell back asleep. The last time she'd drawn all over his face. It wasn't an incident he was eager to repeat. He sighed and patted his bunk bed with a closed fist. Come on up. Jinx didn't need to be told twice, bless her simple soul. He was still speaking when she clambered up the ladder, levered herself upright in an impossible display of acrobatic grace, and landed squarely atop him. Why she enjoyed sitting on his tea, he'd never know. Wait. He didn't much like the look in her eyes. A blonde brow quirked. Alright, I'll bite. What's eating you? She squirmed a little. We almost died. But we didn't. Silence stretched between them, deep and heavy. Do you think that thing will come back? There was a part of him, a terribly large part, that wanted to lie to her. Deceive her. Put her heart at ease. But she wouldn't thank him for it, certainly not if the abomination calling itself Fiddlesticks reared its ugly head in the near future. And besides, Jinx hated lies. So he settled for the brutal truth, tempered with a dose of hope. Probably. Naruto heaved a sigh. But we'll be ready next time. An ambush like that only works once. Next time we'll be prepared. I don't like it, she frowned and rolled over, tucking herself against his side. It knew too much. I know, he wrapped an arm round her shoulders. You almost died. But I got better. Your chakra thingy saved me. It's not a thingy, he flicked her nose. And you need to be careful. Chakra's addictive. Mine especially. Don't care. Jinx nuzzled his neck, planting a scorching line of kisses there. You're warm. But are you even listening? I am, she surprised him by sitting up again. More so by laying down in his lap. Her hands reached up to fiddle with her top. His eyes widened. Jinx? I don't want to die with regrets. Her eyes met his. I want a happy memory, something to wipe all this anger and fear away. You're gonna give that to me. Her top fluttered down, and she crossed both arms before her bare bosom, not quite willing to bear it to him just yet. Got a problem with that? Naruto considered. Shrugged. Nope. Good. Naukmir. Jinx leaned low. Her lips captured and he surrendered to them gladly, eyes drifting shut as he tilted his head for a better angle to deepen the embrace. She didn't stop there. He felt her fingers fist in the waistband of his pants. In the same instant he reached up and tugged at her tattered trousers. She made a pleased noise and he heard something rip. A blue eye creaked open. I like those pants? I like 'em better off. So rude, Jinx giggled, violet eyes dancing in the dark only to pause when her reached up for her long blue braids. Anyone else would have lost their hand. Not him. Credit where it was due, she realized what he wanted quickly. Her hands joined his and in a matter of moments her hair flew free from its braids to tickle his face. Naruto reached up and ran a hand through them, idly marveling at just how long she'd let it grow. Where'd she laughed with him. Dunno why you like me having my hair down, because if you were appealing before, you're perfect now. Why you? Heat speared up her face. Shut up, he dipped up to embrace her cheek. Make me. She dove on him. It felt nice, Naruto thought. Better than someone like him deserved. Her body was soft yet firm against his, her hips undulating atop in him in slow, rhythmic movements. She pushed him down and he pushed back, lips nipping at her neck as she pulled his hair, her nimble fingertips dancing across his. In no time at all they were tangled up in each other, writhing between the sheets, their memories and their pasts obliterated by singular, mindless longing. No fear, no regrets, only two teens taking comfort in one another. The night descended into a pleasant haze. At your lowest point, may you find the greatest strength. When you protect those you love, may you know the greatest joy. And when you face your enemies, may you show them what it is to know pain. Laugh and cry, hey Whiskers. You awake? He wasn't, of course. Jinx knew he wasn't. She'd not dare to do this otherwise. She traced her finger across his bare sissy again, drawing a sleepy grumble from him. Jinx, stop it, that tickles. She bet it did. He looked kinda cute when he was asleep. strong to believe he could become a living murder machine when he was awake. She'd seen what he could do when he was angry. She kinda liked it, all that power. Nothing could touch him. So what if he couldn't control it right now? He'd learn, sooner or later. Still didn't wake up now, though. That was good. It gave her time to think. She tucked herself into his side and drew the blankets close, savoring the feeling of his body against hers. SEC wasn't half bad. If anything, it was a great way to blow off steam. She didn't know why they'd waited this long to try it. Whiskers understood her. Forgot her, damn it. That meant something. No matter what everyone else might say. It was the world to her. Naruto mumbled something in his sleep and rolled over, tucking her tight against him. She liked that. Made her feel safe in his arms. Secure. She never wanted to let him go. Not now, not ever. Why should she? Anyone tried to take him from her, and they'd lose fingers. Simple as. Love you, Dewa. Just listening to that sleepy mumbling drew a small shiver from her shoulders. She'd heard him say it before, but here and now the impact of it truly hit her. He really did love her. Just hearing the words gave her strength, stabilized her in a way few could. He loved her, he loved her, he loved her. Her and only her. Nobody else. Jinx grinned and curled up against him. This was all she needed from him right now, all that mattered. Although she turned her gaze to the ceiling as she snuggled into him, clutching the blankets over her bosom. They'd make half-decent parents someday, right? Not now, obviously. No way in hell was she ready for that, but they'd be great. They wouldn't make the same mistakes like Vi and the rest did. Her imagination took the odd idea and ran away with it. Maybe a boy or a girl, or twins sounded nice. Could have two for the price of one. Yeah, she liked the sound of that. But they'd need names, wouldn't they? Couldn't be any ordinary names. They had to be awesome. Metal. Nothing like those names she'd seen in all those wordy books Naruto and Silco read. Short, sweet, and to the point. Just like an explosion. Maybe bang. Heh, those were cute names for a boy. Faye had a nice ring to it for a girl. Her fractured mind latched onto the idea. Clung to it. Thinking about it brought the ghost of a smile lighting her lips. She needed him. Just as much as he needed her. He wouldn't turn on her, not like Vi did, not like Jinx, all your fault, and no. No, it wasn't her fault. It was an accident. Jinx shivered and cuddled close. She wouldn't let that thing's words steal her joy. To hell with that fiddle-waver thingy. They'd beaten it once, and they would again, won't they? Sleep came reluctantly. She couldn't say it was a peaceful one. You're in a mood this morning. So, even with her back to him, Jinx radiated smugness while she worked. Naruto cast a glance her way as he tugged on his trousers, hunched over her workbench, goggles strapped tight against her face. No doubt she was strong at work on the Hextech orb they'd lifted from Piltover, trying to discern its secrets. He still wasn't entirely sure what kind of weapons Silco wanted her to make, but judging by the sound she was making, she found herself well on the way to crafting it. Good for her. She could use a little joy in her life. It sparked and she yelped below him. Ow, blasted thing, you gonna be all right down there? She waved a hand over her shoulder as he finished getting dressed. I got this. Go and see what Silco wants. She corrected with a flush. I'll radio you if I need ya. Naruto wanted to agree. He really did. But he had a bad feeling about this, an odd, nagging sensation of doubt. I think I'll stay. She tugged her goggles up as he plunked down behind her. You sure? I mean, I won't say now, but I'm pretty sure I've got this. She absently cranked the device. Still looking his way. Mistakes were made. A wave of blue light burst from it and blasted her backwards. It lingered for all of an instant, runes of light lingering in the air. Before they faded, Naruto took it all in stride. He was no stranger to explosions, and this one was weak as far as most went. He rode it out easily. No, so Jinx. She yelped like a child and curled into him, babbling madly. No, Vi, I'm sorry, it was a mistake. I didn't mean to. He pulled her into his arms. Hey, you're okay. Jinx didn't respond. She just clung to him. Just like that day she had another episode, did she? Naruto, or rather the shadow clone he'd sent, scratched the back of his head. Yolda told you myself, but she got clingy. Can't blame her after all she's been through. Neither could Silco. Still, the timing was unfortunate. They could hardly send her out if she was having another panic attack now, could they? Still, this complicated things. Heaving a sigh, he circled round to his desk and sat. I had hoped she would better, she was. Naruto's face had closed down as he plucked out a bottle of wine. By the time he began to pour, he wore a decidedly mulish look. But messing about with that crystal triggered something in her again. I'm sure you know why. Ah yes, the blast. The same that had taken Sevika's arm and nearly killed them all those years ago. He'd not seen her at the time, but in hindsight it all seemed obvious. The girl must have been responsible. Evidently, she'd had a talent for explosions, even then. And speaking of explosive matter, Snow, best keep the matter of the Chem Barons in house. He'd attend to Finn and the rest. But the boing, I have a task for you. Naruto arched an eyebrow. Am I going to enjoy this task? Silco smirked. Given that it involves Jinx's wretched sister. I'd say yes. And just like that, he had the boy's full, undivided attention. The blonde adjusted his gauntlet. Tell me more. Good. While they might yet disagree on what should be done with Vander's protégé, the fact remained that she still needed to be dealt with. They couldn't have a loose cannon like her running about. Not only would she jeopardize Jinx's mental state, but she ran the risk of undermining all they'd built together. The weapons had been moved, the people were in place. It was only a matter of time now. A few last loose ends to tie up before Piltover elected its new sheriff. Which led to this. I want you to trail Sevika. Sevika, the boy's brow furrowed. But she's bait, in a sense. He steepled his fingers and laid his chin to rest upon them. At present, she's enjoying her day off down in one of the lower parts of the Undercity. The girl will seek out information, and there was a time when Sevika held connections to Vander. If the sister still lives, she'll seek those connections out. I'll handle it. You still won't kill her? He supposed it was too much to hope for. Her death would make things so much easier. They could always EXP know, the look in his eyes promised something far worse. But I'm not above breaking a few bones and planting a tracking seal on her. She owes us that much. Brilliant. They'd be able to keep tabs on her, then. Clever boy. He preened. You taught me well. As you say, he really had, hadn't he? He'd always loved Jinx, but there could be no denying that some of his more tactical lessons had found a home in the boy. The thought had him drawing said protégé into a brisk embrace. Do not underestimate that girl. She is capable. Naruto grinned his way. Sounded like it hurt you to say that. It did and it didn't. His feelings toward his brother remained a mire. I will not insult Vander's physical skills, only his morals. And Jinx? Blast, but the boy had a point. She used to be his daughter too, you know. That's not something she can discard easily. I am aware, painfully so. We both know she needs to let powder die. So long as that weakness lives within her, she will always be haunted by that madness. You want me to talk to her? Silco shook his head. No need. I've just the place to take her. Naruto squinted at him. But don't do anything stupid. Perish the thought. I only want to set her free. You seem like a calm and reasonable person, Vi. Are you? A calm and reasonable person. A legend. Calm and reasonable violence was not the answer, Naruto found. It was easy to think of it as such, but that's where many were wrong and not in the way one might think. For you see, violence was not the answer. No. That much was undoubtedly true. Nope, not the answer at all, no Zairi, it was the question. And the answer was yes. Yes. A dozen times, yes. 100 times. Yes, 1,000 times yes. After everything Vi had put Jinx through, he felt a bit of violence was the least he owed Vi. Black eyes, broken bones, a beating besides. He checked his gauntlet for what felt like the umpteenth time as he stomped through the streets of Zaun, making sure its explosive charges were pressed and primed at the ready. They were. Of course they were. Jinx did good work. When she wasn't distracted. When her past wasn't tormenting her. When her traitor sister wasn't running around kicking up a SHT storm in Zaun because she thought it was the right thing to do. How right? Wrong. What would Vi know about any of that? You didn't slap your little sister for trying to help you. You didn't curse her and call her a jinx. You didn't leave her crying in the rain for any reason. Say what you would about Vi, but from what he'd learned of her, he was beginning to think she was a right hypocritical bitch. He hadn't even met her and already he hated her. Not even an hour after trailing Seva and already he'd heard rumors of her asking after Powder. Not Jinx. Powder. As if that were still her name, as if she were the same innocent girl, as though it weren't her fault for making her this broken girl. No, not her, never her, she was the heroine here, the protagonist, that no good shitty excuse of a sister whoops. He paused, planted his unarmored hand on a nearby wall, and took a deep breath to steady himself. Gotta watch him temper his reflection stared back at him from a shattered glass window, letting him watch his blue eyes bleed into red, then back again. A deep breath kept them there. He could feel his anger mounting and the fox's chakra rising writhing within, eager to lash out at his enemies once more. Best keep that under wraps long as he could. He could relatively hold himself back up to 3 tails, but once he went past that well. The results spoke for themselves after what he'd let loose in the prison. He had no longing to become that thing again. Where was the point in having power if it made him a mindless, raging beast? Best to do this on his own. He couldn't trust the fox not to lash out at innocence. I'm not the one who loses my mind when you use that power. You do. Oh, Naruto snatched up one of the broken shards and stared at it with a grin. He speaks again, I'm not some mindless monster and you do well know it. A dark render of his reflection stared back at him from within the shard of glass, glaring with red eyes and scowling fangs. Treat me as such and I'll not help you a second time. Yeah, he quirked a blonde brow. I can handle this myself. Can you now? The fox scoffed. Funny, and here I was willing to make an exception and help you, just this once. Well, this smelled like a trap. No, it absolutely reeked. What's the occasion? I do not take kindly to those who carelessly abandon their kin. His brow climbed higher. Something you're not telling me. The glass shard shattered in his hand, but the beast's voice remained. Bite me, boy. Better yet, by Jinx. Probably how she likes it. His face burned. Low blow. Don't talk SHT if you're not ready to get hit. He was still speaking when an explosive distant crash echoed not 9 paces ahead of them. Aha, Naruto whirled, a wide, shite-eating grin tearing across his tan face. Showtime, a quick hop skip and a jump launched him upright into the air. From there he kicked off a wall, rocketed forward and pink hair filled his vision. You need to let Powder die. So the fear of pain will no longer control you. Silco eased her back into the water. Jinx slowly closed her eyes. In that moment she failed to hear it. Away in the distance, muffled by the water. A muffled explosion. Today just wasn't her day. Vi was tired, sore, aching, and utterly at the limit of her patience. Her nose was bleeding worse. She was pretty damn sure Seva might have knocked a tooth or 2 loose during their brawl. Didn't matter. She had that beach dead to rights and pinned to the ground. One hand was wrapped against the traitor's throat, the other pinning that awful metrum of hers, the better to demand information. She'd tell her where Powder was, one way or another. She would not be denied. Where's my sister? Finally, she'd have her answers and with them, vengeance. Where is Silco keeping her? Keeping her? Seva scoffed up at her. Are you cracked? She works for him. Impossible, I don't believe you know. Seva looked around, well past her now. Her battered grin gained an edge that hadn't been there before. Ask her boyfriend. Boy. Vi growled and gripped her throat harder. Really? Trying to get me to look away. That's the oldest trick in the book. A shadow fell over her. Mind if I cut in? Vi heard the words, saw a red flash, smelled burned flesh. Then everything went wrong. An open palm smashed into her side with all the force of a hurricane. 2 ribs snapped like so much kindling. She had time enough to feel that. Then her world went sideways and she was ripped off Seva, sent tumbling end over end hand like a skipping stone. A building broke her fall. Unlucky her. I've got this, Mom, a distant voice rang in her ringing ears. Fall back. Stick to the plan. Thanks, kid. Vi bridled. No, never mind that. Blinking the stars away from her vision, she struggled upright, warding one arm before her face to fend off an attack. It never came. Seva was limping away but the moment she lunged after her, someone intercepted her. "Hello." Their merry blue eyes met hers as her vision cleared, shining from a dirty visage framed by long, unruly blonde hair and whiskered cheeks, a face even now dimpling in a merry, maddened grin. "You must be Vi." The newcomer thumbed his chin, considering with all the bemusement one might lend to a noisy animal. "I've heard so much about you from Jinx." The strange gauntlet sheathing his right arm cracked and popped as he rolled his shoulders. "She had a lot to say about you." Powder. Had he tortured her? "Who the hell are you? How do you know Powder? Where's my sister?" "In order. Naruto, your Suntobi brother-in-law and far, far away from you." He wagged a finger at her. "How about it, sis?" His voice dripped with saccharine sweetness. "Want to talk this out like adults? You strike me as a calm and reasonable person. Are you?" His head tilted further to regard her and his smile vanished, his expression gone cold. "A calm and reasonable person? Calm?" Her temper sparked. She dragged herself to her feet. "How can I be calm? You have my sister, where the hell is she?" Silence was his answer. "Screw you." Vi swept in to slug him in the face. Quick and strong. Enough to flatten him. She was sure of it. She'd caught her second wind. There was just no way he could fight back with that big gauntlet on his arm. Imagine her surprise when those clenched knuckles smacked into an open palm. A shy-teething grin tore across Naruto's face. Too late, she realized his once blue eyes had gone red. His once round pupil were slitted now, stark and angry like those of some angry dragon. Red light bubbled around him, shimmering like a second skin. "Didn't think so." His voice warped as he spoke, gaining a feral edge. "Me neither." He yanked her down and that ominous gauntlet smashed into her. Something sparked in the metal. Her word erupted into fire, blasting her backward into then through a wall with impossible force, spraying dust and black smoke in every direction. She crashed through it with a strangled grunt. "I've been waiting for this." He waded out into the street after her, rolling his shoulder. "You see, I'm not from around here. We do things a little bit differently where I come from, back in the elemental nations. And you?" A finger rose, jabbing her way. "You owe Jinx a debt for everything you put her through, which means I get a piece of you. Don't worry. You'll pick it up." She had to stall. Take a minute. Catch her breath. "You know me." "Oh, I know all about you, but you're in denial." "No dice." He waded in and she had to defend herself. A roundhouse caught his chin. He took it, turned, and headbutt her, sending her reeling. "You left her." Clenched fists hammered a series of harsh punches against her ribs, each hit rocking her back on her heels. "You left, not her." Blow after blow barreled into her gut until she finally folded over them. A hand grabbed her by the hair and yanked strong, hauling her to her feet as she gasped for air. "And now you think you can just waltz back in after all this time like nothing happened?" He leaned forward. His forehead touched hers. "I don't think so." Vice slugged him in the nose. He didn't even bleed. Another punch made her knuckles ache. By the third, her fist was bleeding. All the while those cold, red eyes never left hers. "Is that all?" A disdainful kick knocked her onto her back. "Get up." His voice growled at her. "I'm not leaving until I see the real you." She rolled onto her good side, cradling her ribs. "What? Show me the monster that made Jinx." A boot nudged her shoulder. "Show me the sister who doesn't give a DMN." "I don't what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." He dropped down onto his haunches to glower at her. "Drop the high and mighty act before I drop you." A bullet pinged harmlessly of his armored back and ricocheted into the street. Naruto paused, scoffed and looked up to the rafters. "Clever girl." Scarlet slits flashed, glowing in the gloom. "Clever won't beat me. Call your little sheriff friend down here, Vi. We'll make it a party." Bless her simple soul, Caitlyn didn't rise to the bait as he intended. Vi almost wished she had. Instead, her rifle barked again. Naruto's unarmored hand rose to meet it. He caught the bullet between two fingers. Inspected it for a moment. Frowned. "Oh." The blonde tooted softly and shifted his grip on the bullet casing, placing it upon between his thumb and forefinger. Fine. He squinted now, focusing on something only he could see. Have it your own way. Let's see, she should be over there. A pit of dread opened up in Vi's stomach. Caitlyn. Naruto flicked the bullet back with such speed that the air popped, creating a visible shockwave in its wake. A shrill cry of pain rose over its passing. Not a heartbeat later, the sheriff fell from her perch and struck the street in a heap. Blood began to pool beneath her trembling body, stemming from an ugly wound in her right shoulder. Psst. Naruto shrugged. Was aiming for her hand, but that works. Clock's ticking. Vi. You better hope she's got some bandages on her, or she'll bleed out at this rate. Are you feeling sad, Vi? When she didn't answer, his face twisted in the dark rictus of a scowl. Humiliated, is that it? Idiot. He stomped down on her stomach when she made to rise, drawing an agonized gasp from her. Another stomp followed, forcing her to catch his boot or be crushed beneath it. You don't know what humiliation is. Anger sparked anew, giving her the strength to roll aside. She came up SWNGNG. And what do you know? That Jinx doesn't need you. He ducked her wild haymaker with silent ease. Not anymore. A fist swung back, sheathed in crimson might. In fact, she's better off without a sister who left. It struck her square in the chin, hurtling her away. Naruto's hand caught her by the ankle in mid-flight and laughing, he spun, flinging her headlong into a building. Her spine struck a table and left her cartwheeling over it before she finally found a wall. Something popped in her back and she gasped, spine arching in agony. A fresh cloud of dust billowed by as the roof creaked ominously above. What will it be, Vi? Naruto's shadow appeared in the haze. Fight or flight? Will you give up? Or his head snapped to the side, cheek twisting just so as she lunged out the smoke and smashed a fist into his scowling face. She hit him with all her might. His feet didn't budge. Those red eyes blazed a twisted, poisonous violet shade of scarlet. He turned back, uncaring of the clenched knuckles in his face. Her hand began to burn as it pushed against the sinister scarlet shroud engulfing him. Gritting her teeth only made it worse. Finally she had to draw back or risk losing her hand entirely. It didn't stop her from SWNGNG again. Naruto took the blow full on, whipped his head around and spat BLD upon the ground. There she is. A finger came up, jabbing her away. There's the monster who doesn't care about anyone but herself. And you call that a punch? Really? Let me show you something. He swayed left, right now, evading a series of quick jabs. Then he was on her again. A rousing uppercut rocketed up into Vi's chin at speed, and quite suddenly she found herself airborne again, spinning end over end. Naruto leaped up after her, grabbed her in midair, and brought her crashing back to earth in a vicious piledriver. A hand closed around the back of her head as she lay in the street, stunned. Up her face went. Down into the street. Up again. Down once more. Twice. Thrice now, until she tasted BLD on her tongue and could barely see straight. Riddle me this, little Miss Punchlet. Naruto growled down at her stunned form, still gripping the back of her head, clawed fingers biting into her skull. Did Powder know that place was a chem factory? Did you? Tell me, if you saw your only sister about to be beaten to death by some mutated, hulking shimmer beast, what would you have done if you were the one holding that damned bomb? The words rattled her more than she cared to admit. That's a lie. You're lying, am I now? It all adds up. The funny thing is, he yanked her head back by the air until his lips brushed the outer lobe of her ear. Silco never would have taken Jinx in if you hadn't left her alone on that rainy night. Come to think of it, she never would have felt the need to use that bomb if you'd brought her with you in the first place. But no. He tooted softly, shaking his head. You couldn't trust her. Instead you abandoned her when she needed you most. You went and walked away. Do you know what that means? No, it means, Vi, that this right here. He gestured to Caitlyn's prone form, the ruined streets, the broken buildings around them, words a low drawl. All of this is your fault. Milo and Clagger, even Vander, they died because of you. The weight of his words was an ocean, crushing down on Vi's shoulders, burdening her with unspeakable guilt. In that instant, her thoughts didn't fracture. They did not break. Nor did they shatter. Had they done so, it would have been a mercy. She would have gladly taken madness over this. No, she was terribly, horribly sane. She was aware of every instant, every word dragging her down, tearing her off her high horse. She'd always thought she had the high ground, so to speak, that she'd done the right thing that night. It hadn't been her fault, or so she'd told herself. But now Naruto's words tore apart the bastion of her self-confidence, dismantling it brick by bitter brick until nothing remained. She wanted to scream, to lash out, to curse him. All she managed was a strangled sob. Look at you, Naruto Tutade. Wasted and gasping for air. Finally realized your failures. He let go of her hair to pat her head. Don't worry. I won't kill you. Death is a mercy you don't deserve. No, out the corner of her eye, she saw him shake his head. You don't get to go yet. First, you're going to see Jinx and realize exactly who you Madesh'll decide your fate. Vi tried to struggle. She really, truly did. It got her nowhere. Naruto's hand closed around her face. All the world went black. You're no sister of hers. You keep calling her that. Would a sister do what you've done? Would she? Reunion, why are you smiling? Because he was. Whiskers was absolutely grinning. Ear to ear now. Like he'd just won the lottery. I got you a present. Jinx looked up from her workbench, and the gem set within. There was something in Naruto's voice just then that made her perk up. He sounded smug. Was that word? Yeah, that was the word. Really smug. Even his laughter sounded smug, echoing in her workshop. That usually boded poorly for their enemies and well for her, but today was different. He'd come rushing in all of a sudden, grinning ear to ear, smiling fit to burst. And what was all this about a gift? That made her even more curious. What kind of present? What's going on? Come and siege rather than tell her outright. He took her by the hand and led her away from her workshop. Just like that, up they went. Up he led her, up from the chasm where she kept all her bombs and barrels, her toys and traps, up to the warehouse through a maze of twists and turns. Soon enough she realized where he was taking her, and that made her all the more curious. Why take her all the way up to the surface in the first place? At length he stopped before a rather heavy, iron-wrought door, one flanked by two bruisers. The guards stood at attention, and while they didn't salute, Jinx thought it a near things indeed. Bozos. On squeaky hinges the door creaked open, revealing a room with ugly wooden floors, a dark blue ceiling and peeling violet wallpaper. Try as she might, Jinx couldn't find the symmetry in it. Looked like someone had gone loco with a paintbrush in here. Or maybe it was all blood. She couldn't tell. With all the crates sprawled about, she'd soon find out. Humming softly to himself, her paramour stepped in ahead of her and shuffled aside some crates. Belatedly, she realized there's something behind him. There in the center of the room, he'd propped something up and draped a heavy, colorful orange tarp over it. Was it her imagination, or was it moving? Really had to work for this, he hummed. Hope you appreciate it, but who am I kidding? Of course you will. Wait, what are you? Naruto stepped back, grabbed the tarp, and yanked it free. Tadavai's gagged, panicked face stared back at her, eyes wide. He'd chained her to the chair with heavy metal links, binding her arms and legs. But not her face. Dirty and bruised though she was, Jinx recognized her at once. A painful beat slashed through her heart, and she found herself gulping. Jinx sucked in a startled breath. Her sister. She was looking at her only sibling, back from the dead. Her brain fizzled helplessly. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. Joy and fear fought in her heart and tore one another to pieces. All that remained was confusion and the voices. They were loud now. Shut up, she hissed at them. I need to think. Anxiously, she turned to look at Naruto. How did you? Thankfully, took her questions in stride. Well, he tapped one finger Vi's bound mouth. It went a little like this. I found her, I fought her, and I finished her. He counted off on 3 fingers, beaming ear to ear. Simple as that. There was also this annoying sheriff girl with her, but I left her behind to bleed. Sheriff Schmeriff, she didn't care about little Miss Goody Two-Shoes. She only had eyes for Vi. Feeling was mutual apparently, judging by the way her sister was staring at her. Although, why did you GG her? Naruto shrugged. She was noisy. Jinx turned a withering glare upon him. Take the GG off. He grimaced and looked back to her sullen sister. I don't think that's a good idea. Just do it, he shrugged and tore it free. Vi winced, all but snapping at him. BSD, Naruto cuffed her upside the head. Not the finest start, Miss Punchalot. Start talking. She growled him. Untie me, no. Jinx cleared her throat. Maybe no. He repeated, turning baleful blue eyes upon her. Not until you decide. Jinx bridled, put off by the anger in his eyes. Decide what? Whether we're going to kill her or not? Vi cast an anxious look her way. It made Jinx feel small. Worthless. But one look at Naruto told her he wouldn't budge. But this was Vi. It had to be. Those eyes that face her hair. It couldn't be anyone else. Why was she looking at her like that? Why was he? Did she have something on her face? The voices gnawed at her again. She struggled to shove them away and looked Vi's way. Vi, she hated how weak she sounded as she downed before her now. Are you real? Her sibling bridled against the chains holding her. Of course I'm real, are you? She hated the weak warble in her voice. Things changed when you left. I changed. I know, you did what you had to. You survived, survive. Naruto leaned in, eyes gleaming like red rubies. That's rich, coming from you? Vi glared at him through a black eye. Who the hell is this guy, anyway? Indignation sparked within her. He's not some guy, he's mine, her sister scoffed. You're what? My everything. You don't get to make fun of him. Naruto preened a little behind her, but held his tongue. Vi wasn't so easily swayed. She balked at Naruto like he'd grown a second head or something. Which would be kind of freaky, really. He's crazy. Indignation became anger. Hate to break it to ya, sis, but so am I, and why is that, I wonder? Naruto tapped a finger to his chin. But because you left her. Jinx flinched at the reminder, painful though it was. Vi was worse. I meant to come back, yet you didn't? Naruto interposed with a face carved from stern stone. That's just what you do, isn't it? Promises, promises. So much air. How has that worked out for you? Not so well, I take it? Every word was a knife in Jinx's heart, all over again. A reminder of what she suffered. In an instant she understood. Vi and Naruto would never get along. But he wasn't finished. You always mean to come back, you mean to say this or that, but you never do. Everything that happened that night can be traced back to you. As far as I'm concerned, you're no sister of hers. Hey, but Jinx clearly cares about you. Naruto drawled right over her. So let's have her decide. Your little sheriff friend is after this, isn't she? He stabbed a hand into his pocket and came up with the blue gemstone she'd been working on. Must have filched it when she wasn't looking. And so are you. You didn't come back for her at all. You just want to help your topside friends. Jinx turned wounded eyes on her sister. Her voice sounded wretchedly weak, even to her own ears. You were playing me. Powder, please. I don't even know what that thing is. Her heart hardened. Liar. Powder, she grit her teeth. Stop calling me that, it's Jinx now. Powder fell down a well. I never should have. Stop talking to me like I'm a child. She moved her pistol in her sister's face. You're a class act, sister. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Sister thought I missed her. Bet you wouldn't miss her. She wanted to pull the trigger. But something held her back. Her gaze flicked to Naruto. Untie her. Jinx, I want to talk to her. The words burst out of her, sharper than she'd intended. Alone. He stood his ground and frowned. I don't think that's a good idea. Untie her and get out. Damn it, I won't ask again. Fine. Don't say I didn't warn ya, missy. Reluctantly, he did as she asked. In no time at all, the chains crumpled to the floor. Vi rubbed her raw wrists and rose slowly, not making any suddenly movements. For once, she didn't speak. If she said something stupid, she would absolutely blow her head off and shoot her to kingdom come. He looked downright mutinous. Too bad. Happy now. She waved the gun at him. Now scoot. He didn't budge. Something in her folded. She darted forward and kissed his cheek. Let me do this. Demon stutter, I have to do this. Alone. Please. All the resistance bled out of his expression. You're sure? Not at all, but she had to try. Had to be certain. Two possibilities stretched out before her. If Vi had really come back for her, then that was good. But if she hadn't, if she didn't believe her well, she'd been betrayed before. And she had plenty of bullets this time. She wouldn't endure that again. Naruto turned toward the door. I'll be right outside if you need me, she's down there, then. Naruto sank into his seat with a sigh. She's. Silco slumped behind his desk. His heart thumped oddly in his ear. How did it go? She's very, very angry with Vi, he palmed his face. And so am I. She told me to get out. Wanted to talk to her sister alone, because that could only end well. No, he reprimanded himself for the thought. It wasn't Naruto's fault. He was doing what he thought best. How could he expect any better when he'd raised him this way? You do realize, of course, that there can be no peace between me and that foolish girl so long as one of us lives. Naruto winced. You don't know that, I know enough. He held up a hand to forestall an argument. If Jinx truly wants nothing to do with her, then I'll let her sister be and good riddance, but the same cannot be said of her. You know why? Left unchecked, she will chase me, she will pursue me, and she will try to kill me. Because you killed Vander. It wasn't a question. Because I killed Vander. He granted him a grim nod. Looking back, I'm not proud of what I did that day, but what's done is done. It's in the past. You're not going to die. Silco granted him a careworn smile. Vi may have something to say about that. Then I'll tear out her tongue. He felt a tiny twitch of pride in his heart at that remark, but the boy wasn't done. He was pacing now, working himself into a towering fury. She doesn't want Jinx. She wants powder. That crystal too. She doesn't even understand what she did to her that day. She still thinks she's the same little girl she was back then. But she isn't. She can't see that, can't see how much she's hurting her. We have to do something. Perhaps he was right. Maybe he wasn't ready to die just yet. There were things he must still do. He had miles to go, and promises to keep bang. A harsh crack echoed from the cell downstairs, sharp and poignant. Naruto exchanged a startled glance with Silco. He saw the concern in the boy's eyes. They both knew that awful sound. Someone had just fired a shot. Naruto booked it. He stabilizes her, and she stabilizes him. Together, they complete one another. But should you try to harm them, may God have mercy on you, for two shall not. Silco. Shot in the dark, the door crashed open in a shower of splinters. And they saw. BLD Jinx had been shot. That was Naruto's first and only thought as he barreled into the room and beheld her BLD, saw her sprawled out on the floor, clutching her leg. Alone. In an instant he was at her side, checking the wound. Vi was nowhere to be seen, but the gaping hole in the wall leading out to the street and the distant whine of a rapidly retreating hoverboard might have something to do with that. Firelights. Why were they Hurino? That wasn't important right now. Whatever the case, they were running and Jinx was hurt. His fault. All his fault. He hadn't been there to protect her, and she'd gotten hurt because of his lapse. He saw red. His every thought went spiraling down into a dark place. Silco was only a heartbeat behind him, and by contrast he looked downright murderous. What happened here? Her eyes flashed, wild and angry. Some punk broke in and shot me, then they ran off with Vi. His face turned thunderous. Who shot you? Fine, Jinx rasped and idly rubbed at her leg, eyes blazing a bright violet. It looks worse than it is. I took some shimmer to comperm. She flubbed the word once more before giving up. To fix it, see. She took her hands from her limb, revealing an ugly red line running down her outer thigh, not a complete thruff hand throw as he'd first feared. Perhaps sensing his mood, she rambled on. You don't need to worry about me, I'll be fine. It's okay. Her words sparked his temper. No, Naruto buelled in, utterly incredulous. Not okay, they shot you. Hey. She drawled the last word, took his face in her hands and kissed him slowly, softly, sweetly. I'm not deado, damn it. A growl escaped her as he touched a hand to her wounded leg. Not so rough that really hurts, that settles it, then. Silco crouched down on the opposite side of her. You're on light duty until that heals. She pouted at him. Boo, he laid a hand on his shoulder nonetheless. Rest assured, we'll find those responsible for this and have their heads. He looked back to the hole in the wall and beyond it, a rapidly receding speck in the sky. The Firelights may have a mole in our organization, a highly placed one at that. He almost seemed to mumble the words to himself. How else could they know exactly where Vi was, let alone send an agent to retrieve her right from under our noses? Naruto perked up. You think she's working with them? Silco took the bait, or perhaps he'd been the one to bait the hook in the first place. It's entirely possible. Time has clearly changed her. No, Jinx moved herself between them with a gasp. That can't be right. She didn't let that masked floozy finish me off. Naruto exchanged a ruefully exasperated glance with Silco, silently urging him to back him up, to say something. And he did, but not what he wanted. Be that as it may, we need to root out the traitors in our midst immediately. Naruto gave him a mutinous look. Now's not the time. Forgive me. Much to his surprise, Silco heaved a long-suffering sigh, rolled one shoulder and shook his head. Old habits, I suppose. Age makes one hasty. He looked between them and that murderous mask of anger softened almost imperceptibly. Take some time. Recover. His hand descended, idly tousling Jinx's hair. Seva and I will see this done. He couldn't leave it at that. When you find the ones who hurt Jinx, don't kill them. Silco sighed anew. Boyne, you didn't let me finish. He smiled at his father figure, baring his teeth in a cruel grin. I want to be the one to pull the trigger. Hey, Jinx snapped. I'm the one who got shot here. I want to pop a cap in him. Fine, you can take the second, third and fourth shot. How's that sound? Jinx made happy Jinx noises and squirmed in place, hips swaying with unadulterated glee. Best boyfriend ever. What? Silco almost smiled as he stood. Almost. He could see a faint upward twitch of his lips. It was enough. I'll leave you be. He paused at the door. Make sure she gets come rest. Naruto saluted lazily. The door closed behind them. To her credit, Jinx waited until her father was gone before she acted, and it was a credit she managed to restrain herself that long at all. The second he departed, she looked to the closed door. Her message was clear. Naruto loped over to it, locked it tight and knelt down. As soon as he did, she rounded on him. Come here. Jinx seized him by the face and dragged his mouth to hers. He kissed her fiercely. Don't scare me like that again. I won't. You're perfect, you know that. She shivered. Say it again. Jinx is perfect? She grinned blearily. So are you. Was she blind? I'm not perfect, far from it. You are to me. She pressed closer to him, cutting him off. You love me for me. Most couples would have been scarred by an event like this, terrified even. They were just angry. Angry, eager, and itching for payback. They really were broken, weren't they? The though brought a small, shameful smile to his lips. Now, then Jinx flung out her arms in a grand flourish. He knew that look. Here it comes, carry me you. He knew it. Jinx, that's no a good idea. She draped herself over him. Hey, I was shot. A blowbrow rose. You're also high on shimmer. She scuffed one boot sullenly on the floor. May away, ain't no maybe about. She was high as a kite. That was that, and no one could convince him otherwise. Really, it wasn't that strong to carry her. She was lighter than she looked, but it was the way in which she demanded to be carried that left him more than a little red-faced. Yay, Princess Carrie, he chuckled once. Yeah, you're definitely high, almost on cue, she giggled and kicked her legs with a giddy laugh. In short order, he brought her back to her workshop and gently laid her down on the bed. She didn't resist in the least. The moment he set her on the mattress, she flopped gracelessly onto her back with a tired sigh. He didn't miss the mad, merry glint in her eyes. All that shimmer was still coursing through her. How much had she taken? Surely not that much. Try not to move too much, all right. He jabbed her ribs, checked her leg, and bandaged it again. You need time to heal. Jinx granted him a bleary grin. Sleep with me. You're in no shape to not that. She dragged him down. I want a cuddle. How could he say no to that? Not when she was in such a state. The fox snorted in his head. Plus, he rolled his eyes. But he lay beside her and let her nestle her head against his knee. Basking in her warmth was one of the few pleasures he allowed himself these days, even if she did hog the blankets. So he lay still and let her curl up round him like some giant teddy bear. If this helped her sleep, it was the least he could do. Hey no. He sighed. Vish loves me, right? His smile died an ugly death. There's no need to think so much about it. She gripped his arm weakly. But she does, right? Warning, 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 loaded question, dodge, diffuse, deny, we'll find out when we find her. She won't escape us a second time. She nuzzled her face into his shoulder. I like the sound of that. The world fell silent for a while, so much so that he wondered if she'd fallen asleep. Surely she must have. He began to drift off himself. And then, you awake, Whiskers. He stifled a yawn of his own. What now? I've been thinking, will we be good parents? It burst up his throat, raw and visceral, to choke him, strangling anything he might have said. Not now, I mean, Jinx babbled on, heedless of his silent panic. But later. A blanket of thick, wet, cloying silence clung to the two of them. Sure, he finally gasped the word. Later sounds good. Her hands curled in his silently. Because now he understood. They were mortal. Vulnerable. One slip and Jinx would be gone. One mistake on his part, and their kid might become he wanted until he was absolutely certain she'd fallen asleep. Finally, he counted to 10, just to be sure. And then he bolted. Fiddlesticks rose in the darkness. Its new body twitched. Fear, Naruto burst into Silco's office with a terrified yelp. I'll be a terrible dad. A beat of silence followed the boy's abrupt statement. Silco blinked. Closed his eye. Blinked again. Excuse me. For a terrifying, wonderful moment he thought that might Miano, surely not. It was much too soon for that sort of thing. You heard me, Naruto was in full panic mode, all but flinging himself over the desk to get at him and grab him by the collar. Jinx was talking about kids, and for the first time, it really hit me. I don't know how to be a parent. I'm terrified. What if I screw up? What if I'm not a good dad? What if Silco held up a hand? No one knows how to be a parent until they become one. I was no exception. That seemed to calm the boy somewhat. He let him go and leaned back, expression quizzical. Even you. A bittersweet pang of nostalgia flitted through him. I hardly expected to find Jinx that day, weeping in the rain. Even now the memory was fresh in his mind, sharp as shattered glass. Hello, little girl, where is your sister? Gone. She left me. She is not my sister anymore. It's okay. We'll show them. We will show them all. Where had that resolve gone? That fire? Not just his, but that of Jinx. When had his plans changed? When had he come to care more for these two than the whole of his organization? If given a choice between the two of them and the nation of Zaun, which would he choose? He already knew the answer. Even now, it startled him. May it never come to that. He hadn't cared overmuch about the Firelights before, enough to deter them, yes, but not actively hunt them, and because of that, they'd grown bold. They would be dealt with, yes, but even as he dwelt on his impending vengeance, his thoughts drifted elsewhere. By the pits, a child. A little one running about, giggling happily. 1,000 times he'd imagined this moment. Never like this. He'd already told Jinx the truth, that she needed to let Powder die, so that the fear of pain could no longer control her. And what had it caused her but pain? Oh, the misery! Such pain would be passed on to her child if she didn't deal with her issues, and soon. The path forward was clear, to him at least. With Naruto by her side, Jinx had been well, not stable. This was Jinx they were talking about. She was chaotic good on a normal day, but she was happy. Founded even. And then her fool of a sister came barreling back into her life and all hell breaks loose. Powder must die for Jinx to live. But that choice was hers to make and hers alone. He could try to force it for her, yes, force the issue and move the impetus of chance upon her, but that left a sour taste in his mouth. More than that, he knew she would resent him for any interference on his part, just as he had once resented Vander so long ago. But there was a chance. Naruto. He paused at the door. That keen azure gaze turned his way. Yeah, old man. He really was, wasn't he? Never had Silco truly felt his age until this moment. The weight of countless years seemed to press down on his shoulders all at once. The thought of a child Jinx and Naruto's child even in the far-flung future both lifted his spirits and threatened to drag him down into the watery depths and drown him once more. There were so many things he could have said in that moment. Only one really, truly mattered. Be better than me. The blonde winked his way. That's a pretty high bar, you know. Even now the boy thought kindly of him. From one monster to another. If he'd met him years ago, would he have been appalled? Would he have spat at him? He would never now. Instead crumpled up a stray piece of paper and flung it at his back as he darted out the door. Brat. He waited until the sound of his footsteps had receded. It all makes sense now, Vander. Silco drew a flask from his belt, uncorked it, and knocked it back. Is there anything so undoing as a family? As a daughter? Or a son-in-law? A grandchild? They were coming to the end of things. He had been fortunate to survive thus far, lucky even, but he knew his days were numbered. Once things in Zaun were settled and Piltover was no longer a threat, he decided, then it would be time to settle things. Vander's daughter would never suffer him to live. Not after what he'd done. Nor could he let her break Jinx even further. Their worlds stood at an impasse. One of them had to die. It was inevitable. Fear was Fiddlesticks. And Fiddlesticks was fear. Always there. Always here. Ever near. There could be no one without the other, no separating the two. Yet separated he had been. Torn and ripped and butchered, the red one had sundered him, pulled him apart, beaten him so badly as to force his very existence to change. But fear could never die, no, he had learned, and so sought a new vessel for himself. A better body, forged not of sackcloth and rusted iron, but something better. It had taken time. Much time, time in which to gather itself and become stronger. It had learned from its mistake, inasmuch as it could learn. Whatever didn't kill you made you stronger. Or stranger. Fiddlesticks didn't much care for the distinction between the two. It sought fear and hunted fear, just as before, but now things were different. For you see, it had thoughts now. Images. Ideas. Emotions. Crude caricatures of true intelligence perhaps, a pale shadow of a proper mind, but there is nothing quite so terrifying as a monster that thinks for itself. Its very being perceived the world in a different light and it liked what it found. So much fear here, so much to hunt and sow and reap. It sought the strong fear smell as before, but it was distant, hidden, unable to be found. So it sought others in the hopes that the fear smell would seek it out. Tonight, it would hunt. Fiddlesticks is just a fable, it grumbled angrily to itself under its breath, snarling in a voice like so many nails scratching on chalkboard. A story to scare children, just a story, once upon a time, once. Upon a time, no, not a story, never a story. Reap Artir, loping forward through a rotten alley, the creature muttered to itself as it slinked along, keeping to the dark. It wasn't as strong as it had once been. It needed more time to recover, more fear. It must avoid the red one for now, but not the blue one. The girl of violet eyes who had the fear stink about her. She would be a feast. High above the rotten rose. Cloth and metal. Teeth and crows by sheer chance, it encountered an old drunkard nursing a bottle of brandy. He would do. Skittering closer, it clambered over a wall, around a pile of trash, and down from a broken roof like some sinister spider. The man-thing did not see him yet, did not stink of fear, that would not do. With infinite delicateness Fiddlesticks reached out and tapped his back. Twice. Thrice now. Annoyed, the man-thing turned and squinted at it. Was it now? Sod off, am having a drink. Gradually his bleary, milky eyes adjusted. Comprehended him in all his horror. The bottle fell from the man-thing's grasp and shattered upon the street. Fiddlesticks leaned in and smiled with its many, many teeth. Hello. The man-thing recoiled. What are you? There it was. The fierce smell. And something far, far, far more pungent. A wise man once said people scare better when they're dying. He was right. Fiddlesticks bit down on his head. The streets ran red. And it fed. Through the field. Down the lane. Voices never heard again, someone screamed down the way. Fiddlesticks looked up and beheld a mother clutching a babe to her boy. Yes, Visfir's usage fear it lunged at them. Leave them alone, a thug got in the way, brandishing a metal pipe. Against all odds, it actually managed to land a blow and bash him in the head. Unbalanced, the Reaper stumbled and crashed into a wall, tearing opening a building with its momentum. The woman fled from it, forgotten now, as the rest of the city came alive, thusly awakened by the noise. That would not do. No, it was no fun when they weren't afraid. Indignant, it opened the nearest gangster from guts to groin and threw itself at the next. A gun barked, drawing an aggravated cry from what passed for its maw. It dodged around a man's gun and slashed down, ripping them apart. Someone ran away with a torch and the ancient horror pounced upon its back in a murder of crows. Not enough. Need more. Fear, yes, it would find the ones with fear and then it would reap. A murder of crows descended upon Zaun. And its people began to scream. Fiddlesticks. And of men. Fiddlesticks. First of 10-inch glutting itself on fearful slaughter, it popped another gangster's head as one would an overripe grape and threw the remains down at their feet. A squad of gangsters, once so bold and brave, paused now in the face of its snaggle-toothed friend. Rip and rend, the survivors turned and fled. I'm coming to help, it loped after them with a raspy cackle, broken joints popping and lurching and cracking. Where are you? I can't see you. I can't see you. Something sharp and stinging and scarlet slammed into its jaw like a hammer, sending it spinning through a shop out the other side. Confusion. Disarray. It did not like pain. Oi, a familiar voice shouted at it, a hated voice it knew so well. How many times do I have to teach you this lesson, Scarecrow? Fiddlesticks dragged itself up like a drunken spider and screamed its defiance. Someone roared back, a noise that gave it pause. It beheld its prey, teeth gone sharp, eyes glowing a baleful red, scarlet light even now shimmering over his skin. Recognized him now, as he stepped through the gaping hole he'd made. Fiddlesticks had no heart to beat, but something twitched in it all the same. Red man flee abandoning subtlety, it crashed through a building and fled. The red man gave chase with an outraged snarl. Fiddlesticks fled into the underbelly of Zaun. One monster chased another. Reality lurched back with a painful start. Jinx reluctantly opened her eyes. And heard the screams. Ah, crap baskets, Vi used to say I fix everything before I broke everything. She used to say a lot and you're kinda like her in a way. Always talking. Now it's so quiet. I don't know what to do with quiet. What am I supposed to do with quiet? It's always me, isn't it? Whether I pull the pin or not, everyone who gets close to me suffers or dies. Wanna know the kicker? Right now. You're the closest one of all. Still think you can fix me? I'll let you in on a little secret. I don't want to be fixed. Jinx. Ashes and BLD fear met fire. Fire clashed with crows and steel fought with flesh, tumbling through the lower levels of Zaun. Naruto could scarcely make sense of it all. Everything was heat and light and claws, his foe an ever-shifting shadow of teeth and foul energy that threatened to taint the very world around it. Everything seethed and shifted and shimmered around them like so much oil in water. Until it didn't. Deeper and deeper they went, fighting without a care for the surroundings, shattering walls and buildings alike. He had fought with Seva, danced with Jinx, dueled with Silco, and most recently, brawled with Vi. This was nothing like that. To even call this a fight would have been a farce. It was fiercer than a fight, more brutal than a brawl, something far beyond both. Neither nobility or laws, nor nothing. It was raw and feral, two monsters trying to kill one another and little else. And make no mistake, they did kill one another. Over and over and over again. Naruto grunted in pain as Fiddlesticks impaled him through the puncturing his lungs. With a clawed hand. Undaunted, he pushed through them, impaling himself yet further still to shove an unstable Rasengan down the cackling horror's throat. From there he forcibly detonated the jutsu and blasted out its insides, only to hiss in pain as the ghastly amalgamation clawed away half his face, exposing skin and bone. He spat scalding chakra through his ruined jaw to send it shrieking to the floor. He had just finished healing by the time the nightmare found its footing again. Cannot die, he snapped off a pipe from the nearby wall and brandished it like a crude club. Everything dies. Not mean, Naruto pushed his hands together and slashed down with his new claws, rending an arm from its ruined torso to tear out its hideous insides besides. Both healed in the same instant. A frustrated scream tore out of his throat, and much to his annoyance, the creature mirrored it. Dimen Thing was learning as it fought likewise. He could feel himself changing, twisting. His temper gave him strength. His hate made him stronger. One tail of chakra had already grown. Nearly two, actually. Soon came three. Already he was nearly at the point of no return, and he just couldn't keep this slippery bastard down for the count. He had to stop it here, if only because he didn't dare let it near Jinx. It feasted on fear, and hers were all too dangerous. A veritable buffet. Who knew how strong it would become if it got a hold of her? He held the line here. Then you die here. In Fox again, Fiddlesticks rushed him abruptly, claws flailing for his face. He swayed right, left, right again, gave ground until he saw the moment. It came when the crazed creature tried to bite him, foolishly overextending itself. He reacted accordingly and clobbered it across the face with his new weapon several times. On the fifth pass, he beat its skull into the ground, momentarily stunning it. Gotcha! Stomping down on its jagged head, he used the badly corroded pipe as a spear and pinned the writhing eldritch horror to the ground through its ear. It screamed and struggled and squealed, but the moment brought him a brief reprieve to raise a hand and conjure an even larger Rasengan into his palm. Planting his feet, he wasted no time slamming down on the creature's head. Just like that, its sinuous shrieks became a squeal of agony. The vents around detonated explosively around them as the jutsu went off like a bomb, bathing the world in scalding gray fog. Naruto grunted against it, having prepared for just such an outcome. Slapping on his spare rebreather, he channeled chakra to his eyes, coating them in a thin protective film, and dared to hope. Was it dead? Oh nope. Movement in the mist ahead of him, scuttling frantically past on all fours like some deranged dog. Naruto throttled back his chakra and lazily tracked it with one eye, breath muffled against the rebreather. Gauging the distance between him and it, he plucked one of Jinx's borrowed pistols from his belt. Thumbed the trigger with a sigh and bang. He took the shot. A pained shriek was his reward. Chakra bullets, beach. He grinned behind the rebreather, red eyes glowing in the gloom. Not so brave now, are we? Something else ran past behind him, impossibly fast, the silhouette of a shape that might have been human or monster. He rounded on with a scowl behind the mask. It was impossible to tell in the gray with all these shifting shapes and shadows. But this one looked smaller. He hesitated, afraid to shoot a hapless civilian, and turned his eye to the crater he'd left Fiddlesticks in. Yup. Very much empty. Bugger. Something slammed into his leg and he reacted instantly, bringing Jinx's pistol down between their eyes. Frightened amber orbs gazed up at him, framed by messy brown hair. He hesitated. It was just a kid. A little girl, wearing little more than dirty rags and a goggled miner's cap far too big for her. She gasped and gazed up at him with a fearful expression, incidentally revealing a gap between her two front teeth as she coughed into the haze. Blast it all. She was just so small it didn't speak well for Zaun when a child expected you to blow your brains out. He blew out a sigh. Damn it. Almost capped a kid. Scramp breath. She didn't budge. Didn't you hear me? He whirled back to nudge the girl with the back of the barrel. Scoot. Go find your parents or something. This'll all blow over in the morning. Still no movement. Her eyes had grown very large and very wide indeed. What's the matter with you? He frowned down at her. Don't you have parents? I know I look scary and all, but I ain't a bad guy. Movement behind him, a towering shadow in the swirling gray. The little one gasped. Not him. He was prepared. Annoyed when a twisted scythe whistled out of the dark, but not unprepared. Apparently it could use weapons, now. Great. Naruto stepped to the right, let it bite into the metal decking, stomped down on the ghastly thing to keep it there, and without so much as a second glance, spun Jinx's pistol between his fingers. The barrel arced back over his shoulder and slammed down against his jacket, bracing itself, unable to miss. From there, he squeezed the trigger 3 times in rapid succession. 3 shots, 3 bullets, 3 more rounds infused with demonic chakra. Fiddlesticks reeled back into the fog, fists flailing as it screamed. Naruto turned a baleful eye its way, then paused. The kid was coughing in the gray. Dim in his bleeding heart. Taking a deep breath to fill his lungs, he pulled the rebreather from his face and pressed it to the brat's visage. She needed it more than him. The hermetic seal pressed tight across her nose and cheeks, quickly banishing the worst of the smog. Baffled, she clung to it with both hands, still staring up at him with very wide eyes. Would his and Jinx's kids look like her, someday? Geez, he couldn't help but pity the poor thing. What's your name? No words. She waved her hands. Was she mute? Fiddlesticks lunged at him while he was distracted, to which he emptied a clip into it in retaliation, smashed one of its legs out from under it, and kicked it back into the fog. When the beast made to rise, he launched another pipe at it, skewering the creature to the wall. It wouldn't last. He looked back to the girl. Well, she hiccuped once, voice muffled behind the breather, barely audible to his ears, and traced letters in the air. Isha. Great. He crouched down before her quickly. If you need somewhere to go, head to the last drop. Silco will look after you. Sure, he'd be surly about it, but the old man was a softy where kids were concerned. And besides, little Isha could do so much, much worse. Smeech would probably carve her up for shits and giggles, to say nothing of the other Cambarans and their erratic taste. Better she be with the boss than the others. And hey, Jinx would take a liking to her. Definitely. Hopefully. Maybe. Blasted brat was still staring at him, though. Small wonder why. She looked at his shimmering red chakra, then peered past him into the gray, the fog already rushing back in. He could already imagine her question, if she could speak. Are you going to make the monster go away? How could he possibly do that, when he was so much worse than that wretched, rambling thing? Already, he heard the skittering of claws across steel. It was coming again. Time to go. Beat it, brat, he flashed his fangs at her and patted her helmet. Run along now. Go on it. He waded into the gray, leaving her behind. If she was smart, she'd. Scarper. Fresh smog rushed into his lungs, burning but not choking him. His foul chakra kept it at bay. But not for long. Fiddlesticks was hiding now. It had learned from its reckless charge. He could sense the creature lingering in the smog, just out of sight. A muscle jumped in his jaw, and not from fright. I need more. The fog didn't answer him. Give me the strength to destroy that thing. Something else did. Something older. Something darker. You can't. Not in your current state. At best, you can banish it for a time. Didn't ask for excuses, he rounded a corner and gripped a wall, fingers biting deep into the brickwork. I asked for power. Foolish brat. You can't handle the full extent of my might. A growl rumbled in his throat. Give it? Did you not hear me? I don't care, he punched the wall, fighting down a cough. Give me strength, give me what I need right now. Fiddlesticks exploded from the gray above and fell upon them in a whirling dervish of death. Fine, but don't go blaming me for what happens next, for chakra tails manifested behind him in an instant. Heat surged through his veins in response as his skin smoldered away, allowing him to lash out in a burst of furious speed. Claws scraped off his cloak, allowing him to reach up and grab the beast by the face, slam it down to the ground. Twice. Thrice. Pinning it with his new appendages, he dug his chakra into the creature's crude carapace, blackening its body with malice. 5 tails now. Thoughts slipping away. Hold on. You think you're the monster here, don't ya? He dug his crimson claws into Fiddlestick's face, boiling away the sack that covered its skull. But ya ain't. I am 6 tails. Focus wicked armor plating grew over his body, but he scarcely felt it. He only had eyes for the creature before him. It screamed and tore at him, trying to gouge out his eyes. He barely felt it as he redoubled his grip. It was stronger than before. Faster. Smarter. But so was he. His thoughts were spiraling downward, but that was fine. If insanity was the price he had to pay to stop this thing, then it was one he would gladly pay. I won't let you hurt Jinx again, do you hear me? You're done tormenting her. A ghastly red orb roved his way. You will lose her anyway. His eyes blazed with fresh fire. Shut up and die, light built in the back of his throat, white hot. He took all that energy and unleashed it. Fiddlesticks absolutely shattered. Little puncher little cowardiesious smell of fairy will do Vi awoke with a violent start, heart hammering in her. Just another nightmare, a bad dream right. Baffled, she looked about herself. Where was she? This was a thing. Jinx stumbled into the gray, clutching a rebreather firmly over her mouth and grimacing behind it as she wove her way through the chaos. Her wounds still hurt like a beach, but at least she could walk, if only just. Running was definitely out of the question, but she had her trusty minigun strapped back to her back and one of her pistols besides. Whiskers must have swiped one when she wasn't looking. Sneaky bastard, touching her stuff. She'd ride him into the ground for that later. Leaving the last drop had been difficult, if only because Silco's stupid dad was watching her like a hawk. Thankfully he'd been distracted by Seva and she'd used the chance to escape. She had to, if only to see what in blazes was going on outside the last drop. Whiskers was gonna chew her out for sure if he found her first, but that didn't matter because as he was going to find him first it made sense when she thought about it. Alright. She had a few screws loose. Still, they'd really torn up the place. It wasn't strong to find him. He'd torn up a good bit of Zaun chasing that thing, ripped his way through the underground, leaving a path of destruction in its wake. She just had to follow the fires, the holes, the blast marks and the screams, probably the roaring, too. Wait a hot minute. Roaring? That couldn't be good. Scaling a pile of rubble, she beheld a burning figure in the distance, a creature etched in red and white, hunched over the rapidly dissolving remains of what might have been a scarecrow once upon a time. She wasn't sure. The crude caricature of a corpse, funny words crumbled even as she looked on, leaving the beast looming over a blasted crater, dark and pitted. He remained there, hunched nearly double, growling softly as the people of the Undercity kept their distance. Not Jinx, she walked toward him. Whiskers. The beast saw her coming and snarled, tails thrashing at the street. CRP. She grimaced. You lost control again, didn't you? 6 tails. That's 2 more than last time. You ever gonna reach 9? The beast bared its fangs anew, hackles rising as its claws dug into the street. Hey, don't make that face. You won. Be happy. A crimson tail lashed at the ground, warning her. She wasn't afraid. Why should she be? You won't hurt me, would he? No bad thoughts. That way lay disaster. Be brave. Jinx, Vi used to say I fix everything before I broke everything. Her lips parted as she chuckled bitterly at the reminder. She used to say a lot and you're kinda like her in a way. Well, when you're not like this. A hand gestured his way, always talking. Now you're so quiet. I don't know what to do with quiet. Palming her face, she covered her right eye and shook her head, sending her braids thrashing about like a pair of long blue whips. What am I supposed to do with all this quiet? I need you to come back and start talking again, because if you don't think I can function without you. He growled at her, and the sound made the voices louder. Sorry, she muttered under her breath. It's always me, isn't it? Whether I pull the pin or not, everyone who gets close to me suffers. She dared a step closer. Wanna know the kicker? Right now. You're the closest one of all. Another step. And maybe that's my fault, she muttered. You did this because of me, didn't you? You were trying to protect me. One more. Is it because you want to fix me? She spread her arms wide and tilted her head. Oh, I don't think you want to do that. And that's good. She reached the lip of the crater and slowly, carefully eased her way down into it. All the while the beast watched her, growling softly. But he didn't attack. That was good, right? It meant that whatever he was, whatever he'd become, Whiskers was still in there. Which meant she could talk to him. Jinx wasn't the best talker. She was hardly what you would call a motivational speaker. She tended to ramble at the worst times, and right now she was really rambling. I'm at this, aren't I? She laughed aloud, at herself, at him, at everything. Sorry for being so broken. But she had to try. If not here, then who else would? It would only take one sicko seeing and shooting Naruto to unleash his wrath on Zaun. He'd rip up the entire Undercity in his rage, root and stem, And not a single soul down here would be able to stop him. Most would try. Most would cry. Most would die. And she couldn't have that. Because he was her whiskers. She loved him. But hey, I'll let you in on a little secret. She removed the rebreather and leaned forward, daring to expose her face to him. I don't want to be fixed. And neither do you, I think. We're perfect just the way we are. We'll make Piltover pay, just like Silco said. All those posh noble bastards in their ivory towers, will show them all. Inching forward, the rest of the way, she dared to embrace his blazing forehead. It made her lips tingle. The beast growled at her again. It almost sounded like a whimper of pain, at least to her ears. Jinx stepped into him and embraced the beast. We can be monsters together. Holding him hurt. His body was scalding, positively hot to the touch. She could already feel herself beginning to burn. But she didn't let go. To let go was to give up on him. He'd never given up on her, so she wouldn't on him. That's what couples did, right? They were supposed to be there for each other. Even through the pain, even through the strong times, the awkward times, the agonizing times. Because the good times always came afterward, didn't they? That was what it meant to love someone. You were there for them even if no one else was. Her chin came down on his shoulder as she pulled him closer, holding tight. Let's burn it all down, no. He heard her. Jinx knew he did, because his transformation shattered, broke like so much glass. Red light bled away, revealing the young man beneath. Her man. Gradually she glimpsed him as he reappeared, the feral light leaving his eyes. He staggered for a moment, sagged against her like dead weight, but she was still holding him onto the first place, refusing to let him fall further than he already had, so that was fine. At length he recovered enough to stand under his own power and leaned into her, pressing a singed whiskered cheek against hers as he tried to take in his surroundings. Jinx, he rasped her name, confused. What did I miss? Nothing, whiskers, she kissed his cheek. Where's the scarecrow? Did I win? Even now he worried for her. Idiot. No, her idiot. She hugged him. Yeah, you don't. You won. There was no fear here. Only ashes and BLD. Monsters am I. Perhaps you should speak more softly to me then. Monsters are dangerous.